All right, what's up, everybody? This is the Perry Howard Mason show, and I'm with two distinguished guests. The very beautiful and gorgeous Dr. Dana Reynolds Marniche. She will be joining us because this is her interview. This gonna be kind of semi-autobiographical. We gonna know about where she got her bachelor's, master's, and PhD from, and you know, and another thing about this sister right here is that she is one of the foremost experts on North Africa in the Middle East. She has worked with one of our great scholars, Dr. Ivan van Sertima, and I would argue one of his best works, his best anthologies, The Golden Age of the Moors in Spain. She actually, in my opinion, has also written the best article in that entire anthology, and it's called "The Ethno History of the Berbers." And and she is also she's author of um, the African uh, and Hebrew version of the African and Hebrew, the African and Arabian origins of the Bible, and she also has written another article called "Fear of Blackness," and she's no joke, you know, and I got another one of my OGs with me. He comes out of the UK. His name is Robin Oliver Walker. He is the author of a monumental work called When We Ruled, and he has worked extensively with Dr. Finney Biko and Kenny Bakey. And he has also been on the Hidden Colors series, Hidden Colors 4 to be exact, directed by the great cultural nationalist Tariq Nasheed. And so I want to start off this interview by asking, Dr. Dana, um, tell us a little bit about your origins. Where you from, where you got your bachelor's, your master's, and your PhD. Remember, this is your interview, so go as long as you want, beautiful sister. Go as long as you want.
Well, thank you, Perry. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today to be able to bring out the information with Mr. Robin Walker, who I greatly admire. One of the few, unfortunately, um, historians that I've seen on YouTube that I admire. Well, my bachelor's, if you want to talk about bachelor's or you want to talk about my education, that's two different things. So I consider my bachelor's was in history from Rutgers, but I consider the greatest of my education basically came from my upbringing and parents who guided me, to the right kinds of books, I'd say. And that's basically what education is about. Your parents have the greatest influence in your education and your value system and, the kinds of interests that you have in terms of, your college degrees. So I'd say I got most of my education from my parents. My dad had me reading, uh, you know, The Invisible Man and things of that sort when I was in elementary school. So, but yeah, my history was my bachelor's, and that's where I got to meet Dr. Van Sertima, who was he was interested in the Moors at that time, and he was writing about the Tata. Let's see. So, and I told him, that I had some background in. Actually, I think he was the reason that I wanted to go to Rutgers because he was interested in the Moors, and I had a lot of experience reading, J.A. Rogers and that sort of thing. But also, old colonial texts about the Berbers, who the true Berbers were. So, so I guess after that I went to, well, actually at Rutgers I actually met Zahi Hawass, who was the director of the Giza Inspectorate, at the time. He was getting his doctorate at University of Pennsylvania, and I met him just haphazardly, probably fatefully, but haphazardly. And I was actually translating text for him into from French into English. And that's where I met a Yemenite named, well, I forget his name, but he's an archaeologist, a student, graduate student there, about to get his doctorate. And he was telling me about the Murad and certain groups in the ancient Southern Arabian area that I had read about at Rutgers. Now at Rutgers, I was into different, ancient history, Israelite history, African and African American history.
Okay, I found this on the web.
Sociology, sociology and anthropology. Francophone history, that kind of thing. But I was, sometimes I would cut school and go to the library and just research on the ancient Near East and ancient Africa. So that's where I met, that's where I found a lot about the Himyarites and Sabians, when I was in actually high school and college. But so I met this guy, and he was, he looked actually like Sudanese, but he was actually from the Yemen, and he told me about, that's where I found out that there was a book out called The Bible Came from Arabia, and which I was, found kind of funny because he said everybody in the Bible, or the Genesis, was proposed to be from Arabia in the book. So, but I did find it interesting because I'd read, Josephus at that time, who was an early Roman Christian writer about the Horn of Africa, or about, the ancient world in general. But he had mentioned that the so-called children of Keturah had settled in what's called the Troglodyte area of Africa. And so I kept that, what he had said on my mind, because I did remember about the so-called Midianites and Peturites and the names of those people that were similar to those found in Eritrea and Sudan and East Africa, the Afar and Danakil or Ankala, people like that. So, and then by that time, let's see, I had been to Paris too. I'd stayed in Paris for a while, took a few classes at the Louvre and dropped out. And I saw some of people that Diop mentioned when I was there, some of the scholars that he mentioned in his book. And they spoke French so well, I was just so in awe because it sounded like English. That's how well they spoke French. But Valois was there. But, it was just, I got this feeling that it was very Eurocentric, and I didn't want to, I don't know, for some reason I just felt scared. I wanted to drop out. But in Paris, you would see in the subways, you'd see these paintings of ancient Persians and ancient, paintings from the Louvre, or I guess there were copies of what was in the Louvre, and you would see ancient Black Persians and that kind of thing. From the Achaemenid period. But also while I was there, I met a Persian guy that said that, at that time there was a war going on it was the Persian Gulf War, and they were in a fight with the Syrians and other Arab people, the Iranians. And he was telling me one of the reasons he didn't like the Syrians is because they pretend to be the Arabs. And he said, if you look in our text, you will see that the early Arabs were short, dark-skinned, brown people with African hair. And I said, that's interesting. So, so all these things just kept building up. I went to University of Chicago after that and studied with Bruce Williams. I feel like I'm saying too much. Just let me know if I'm talking too much.
No, go ahead. This is your interview. We're gonna be on here for about 4 hours. Like that's how much the timer is.
All right. Well, I don't want to talk all about my past, but so I studied independent studies with Bruce Williams, and I went to the Oriental History Library. They had an Oriental library there, museum library there, and you would see paintings, which I found out later they're now gone, but in another institute, but paintings of Africans that were called Libyans, but they were Tehenu, and they looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. Later on, I saw the Fulani people on this documentary, and I saw they look like the same people.
So they family members. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. They look like they could be actually my brothers. These people that had small beards and they had kind of like these little aquiline noses, but dark brown skin. And I have not seen these paintings anywhere else. I haven't seen these paintings. Well, I've started to see similar to them, but not as dramatically Fulani looking or Wadabi looking as those paintings. And I called back a few years later, or several years later, and there was a guy there that was still there, told me that the painting was something from Nina Davies' book on one of the Libyan peoples, I forget. But she did the early studies of Egyptological paintings in Egypt. And actually they did, copies of these Libyan paintings, and they came back and put them in books. So that's all this stuff, like I said, kept getting built up, and I was trying to figure out now how come I haven't seen these pictures anywhere else? Then I saw this book called The Eastern Libyans by Ulrich Bates, and everything started to be put together. He was saying that actually the original Libyans or North Africans were brown people, dark brown people who were later invaded by people of the sea who mixed, some of them started mixing with them. That was in what's called Eastern Libya, not, the rest of North Africa, but a small part of northern Libya. And that's when I think after figuring out a lot of stuff, I called back Dr. Van Sertima and I said, well, we should really do a book on the Moors, on the ancient Moors, because I'm finding out a lot of this stuff, and I'm finding it hard to believe now that the Moors were, fair-skinned people. And so that's how that article got started. But at that time, I wasn't really sure exactly how. I knew they were black, and I knew that the Fulani were involved, or the Takruri, and other people related to Africans, but I didn't know it was, that there was a completely different. There were two groups of Berbers, for example, that were, one was related to the Songhai people, and the other were what are called the Tuareg now, or the Tamashek, the people that wear the veils. But anyway, so, what happened? Then I was at the University of Chicago, and I studied with also the head of American anthropology at the time, Dr. Jane Boykstra, who, she guided me a lot into the early Holocene, North Africa and Africa, the physical anthropology of the populations in Northern Africa and the Maghreb. And she also told me that, so some of those books led me to the knowledge that they were using certain euphemisms for early North Africans and early East Africans, like, aside from the typical Hamitic Caucasoid, terminology. And these were such as Euro-African and Mediterranean race, and even Euro-African, Gracile Mediterranean. There were a few other terms I can't remember, but so later on, I wrote that article in Egypt, Child of Africa. It's called the Myth of the Mediterranean Race. I think that's what it's called. Where it talks about, exactly who these people in Neolithic Europe were, and the fact that they were not, present ancestors necessarily of present Europeans, but of early people that were around the Mediterranean and in Eastern Africa and the Sahara. And in most of the Near East at that time. So in the Neolithic era, most of the Near East was covered by what were essentially African-related or African-affiliated people. But then at the same time, Dr. Boykstra and others were developing what's called genetic anthropology. So she was actually one of the founders of it. And then you start to see, a shift away from looking at physical anthropology of different North African populations or African populations and craniometrics and that kind of thing, which also distinguished the Mediterranean type people from, European people, or what's the dominant European type. But anyway, so that's, so I followed that along too, as well, the genetics and how they were kind of using genetics to say that there was no such thing as, these, we couldn't really tell the difference between European people and Africans that were in the Mediterranean, that kind of thing. But later on, that finally developed to the point where, yes, you can say that certain groups like the Garamantes were related to, sub-Saharan Africa. You see those articles now coming out. So science is catching up with this, with the truth and with the facts, the same thing that the physical anthropology had done. So, I mean, after getting my master's, and I was teaching a few places in New Jersey, and then went to Columbia and did some study in development of Africa, development in the Sahel and that kind of thing. And I was there when I think there was a professor there, I forget his name, but he also was very, anti-GIOP. And I went to a conference and I was like arguing with him about something, I forget, but I realized that a lot of African people were not really, they were just following along with the typical Eurocentric view of history and of how Black people developed and stuff. And that there was, polygenetics. There was a European continent with whites and an African continent with blacks and an Asian continent with people that looked Asians, whatever that meant. And what else? So at Columbia, I met my ex who was a Kabyle from Algeria, and he kind of stopped me from going there after the first year. But I did manage to teach in Brooklyn. I taught world civilizations and museums, a museums course. I also did. I worked with Terry McLuhan, who was the daughter of Marshall McLuhan, and she was telling me a lot of stuff about. Well, I got to research culture a lot more, culture and related to land and light, different religious philosophies regarding land and light among indigenous people in Africa and the Americas and Europe. So, and that book was called, I don't remember any of the names of my book or the books I was involved with. It is called Touch the Earth. No, not Touch the Earth. It was another book. I don't remember the name of the book. But anyway, that was nominated. It was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. I'll remember it later, I guess. But it didn't win the Pulitzer, but it was nominated for the Pulitzer. And then I also worked with the lady responsible for communications and media and stuff. And I don't know if this matters, I had a magazine for Black women that was in different countries and stores. And, yeah, Black Women's Magazine. That was around, that was later. That was after I came back from New York, divorce and stuff. But so, but along the way, I've been studying, and also, then I got another master's in education, multicultural education from Eastern University, and also got a chance there to work on National Geographic research on the way they portray Africans and in the media, and early Christian theology with regards to Africans and things of that sort. So that's actually a Christian university. It's one of the top adult universities, but it's like it's a Christian-based or Protestant Christian-based university. And then after that, Well, I think before that, was finished, I had been on writing on blogs around the internet, and introducing certain ideas, and then somebody saw me from not Birmingham, Binghamton University in New York. One of the African directors of the African Studies Department. She saw what I was writing, and she asked me to write a an article about the Moors, So this second article was called "Fear of Blackness" and had a subtitle, which is part of the West Africa Review. It's the only, I guess it's their only. It took up a whole issue, so it's basically a whole issue. I think it was like 180 pages or something. But it was again on the Moors, but even more information, detailed information about who the Moors were in relationship to Africans, and this was peer reviewed. So so I was glad that was like one of my first true peer reviewed. Actually, the Golden Age of the Moor, the article in there, apparently, Dr. Vincent was saying that he had gotten a lot of feedback from scholars all over the world for that article too, but the journal itself was not peer reviewed. But West Africa Review is peer reviewed, and so I'm glad that got out. And then, okay, so then I was working on another book with relationship to the Arabs as being African affiliated. The original Arabs, or not the Arabs per se, but the populations of Arabia, of the Arabian Peninsula, Peninsular Arabia, because Arabia, different times meant different things. And I found out that everybody, actually, every time I looked for the origins of these people, they turned out to be basically Black people. And then I had also found out through my article on the Moors that they were actually a lot of the early Moors in Spain. They were the people that were called, Black as soot or Black as ink, that kind of thing. Because at that time, the Az people were who invaded, as Saracens who invaded, Champollion. What's his name? Charles the Great. What was his name? The early Charlemagne. Sorry, Charlemagne. And how they talk about the Moors being Black, and the Alfonso talking about the Moors being black as pitch, that kind of thing. A lot of that talk was about Arabians, not necessarily Arabs.
Can I ask a question? Okay, so you said that you have you have a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a PhD, right?
Right.
Because the only reason why I'm like just reiterating this is because I'm gonna send this to, my professors at my university that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
And how I said, I want you to speak for my Africana Studies class in the future. So I just want to reiterate that for them. And you were talking about the Moors, and I want to kind of like shoot the next part over to Robin after this. But after,
I said, okay.
The first thing that I kind of like knew about the Moors was I was a Shakespearean actor for about 7 years. And I did Othello. And I kept tripping off of, like, why did Iago keep calling, Othello, the Moor, like, I hate the Moor. And my theater teacher, who is a white man, because when white people tell us that this is correct, we can't go wrong, with them when they tell us that, but he said that when Iago means I hate the Moor, I hate the black man. And Iago, he's saying stuff like, the curly haired man, the old Moor, the devil. He just going crazy because that's what Othello is about. It's about white supremacist named Iago, and he just conspiring to bring the black man down. The naive black man down, as I should say.
Oh, he was European. I don't know, but at that time how developed white supremacy was, but anyway, they were afraid, basically, had a fear of the Moors because the Moors were the ones that brought a lot of the Renaissance into Europe. Early, were responsible for the development of the Renaissance. So I'm not sure how supreme they felt at that time, but you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I
Yeah.
do, because like basically what you're saying is that race wasn't really a
Well,
big
no,
thing at that.
it definitely was a factor. I mean, but it probably wasn't in the same way that it was today. That it is today in America and now in Britain. So,
Okay.
but
Mhm.
uh, I was going to say something about that the Moors because and you go to J.A. Rogers, you'll see paintings of the Moors that were done in the heraldry all over, of course, Europe, but you'll see have Italians and other people today telling you that that they just drew it that way because such and such, no makeup things.
You said you mentioned the Italians, right?
Yeah, Italians, Spaniards, a lot of European, especially the Southern Europeans, like to say that they're not what the real Moors look like. Oh,
Because I had a Italian teacher who was Sicilian,
oh, okay.
and he was very dark. Like he had like a really thick beard. He
Yeah,
was
you're telling me
dark,
about him. Yeah.
and he had like a afro almost, like a handsome guy. And I used to be like, man, like are we family, man? And he did not like that at all. Like he would
Yeah, that's
he
what I'm
would be.
saying. Italians, in the South, especially, don't, want to be considered descendants of Africans or Black people. So a lot of them, not all of them, actually, a lot of them. Because I have friends here today that are older than 60, Italian, and they'll tell you that when they were growing up, they were called the N-word here in America. A lot of younger Italians, I don't know that, but yeah.
I thought that was called the G word, but
That too. Yeah, but both.
oh my God! White supremacy just be eating
And,
everything up.
yeah. And one of them told me that one of her grandparents, they weren't going to come over because they thought they wouldn't be able to get married because the grandfather was so African looking that they thought, they didn't want to. It was illegal to be married, of course. Interracial marriage was illegal, so they didn't want to come over. That was early 20th century.
Mm,
Yeah, if I can jump in, the
go
same
ahead.
issue happened with Johnny Cash. You know that Johnny
Yeah,
Cash's
yeah.
first
I
wife
saw. Yeah,
was Italian,
The
and
Johnny
yeah,
Cash.
the
yes,
Johnny Cash. So
yes.
you can pull it up. So the Ku Klux Klan were on his case because
Uh-huh.
there was a photograph that was taken of his first wife, who was Sicilian.
Mm.
And the photograph is, shall we say, interesting. Let's just leave it like that.
Yeah. But I looked it up. I actually looked up her background, and I think she was what you call Melungeon, which was the early, like a lot of early Americans or white Americans descend from Melungeons were the people that were mixed with Africans and to a certain degree Native Americans, but mainly Africans. And they changed their their categorization over the decades, and became whites. And
Mm,
they even say that most Southern whites actually have African ancestry, recent African ancestry.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. Hmm. So race is very interesting. I mean, if they wanted to bring up the because there's people now on the extreme right side now going around saying, look, Black people had slaves too, and everybody's mixed now, so. So they're gonna come if Black people try to start talking about reparations and stuff. All they're gonna have to do is go and look at their own ancestors, the white people, from the South, and they'll see that, a lot of them were actually descendants of African slaves too. So I don't know how it's going to work out in the end. Yeah.
Robbie,
So,
you could take over the second half. You could take over this part.
Okay, let me ask a few some of my questions.
did you say
Okay.
white question?
What do you say?
Did you say white questions or right questions?
Some of my questions.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
In your essay on the Moors, that's in Van Sertima's book, you quote the Marshal saying the phrase "woolly hair like a Moor."
Oh, Marshall, yeah. Uh-huh.
And I looked it up, and the context was not woolly haired like a Moor, but same point, yeah, the Moors were woolly haired.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a population in North Africa that wasn't woolly haired.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that gives the impression of is a majority black ancient North Africa and the minority non-black ancient North Africa. So the question I'm asking you is, how would you apportion Moorish history between black people and whoever this mysterious, not woolly haired like a Moor population?
No. First of all, I don't think in the times of the Romans that they considered people. I mean, woolly hair like a Moor, and I've seen also crinkly hair like a Moor. In the translations later on. I'm not sure what you're saying in terms of Romans believing that there were certain non-woolly-haired people there, because that's not the case.
No, but if you look at the context.
In other words, the way people talk about Moors today is not the same way that the Romans talked about them.
Oh yeah. But the reason I'm bringing this up is when it comes to dealing with the history, we have to be prepared for all arrows being shot in our direction, and what we, get our, if you like, story straight, to dodge those. And the issue of this, because the context was not woolly haired like a Moor, meaning that there was some other group. And you mentioned yourself.
No, wait. I think you're confusing what's his name said. Not black. Not black skin. The Vandals were not black skinned like the Moors were.
No, not woolly haired like the Moors. I think
Procopius said about not black skin like the Moors, but Martialis just said, I talked about Santra or running towards him like a Moor with woolly hair. It didn't say anything about not woolly hair. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. If it wasn't Marshall then, but the main point is that whoever this non-woolly haired population were, what I'm trying to do is get a sense.
No. Okay, on one thing.
Yeah.
It's important that we know which phrase you're talking about, because Procopius definitely talked about the people that were in North Africa, aside from the Moors being the Vandals.
Right, good. So them, that's the population, them.
Not the Vandals.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, there were several other populations, and that's why I think people really need to read the peer-reviewed version, because it does, put everything together and explain where these people came from, the other North Africans, because they came from many places at different times. Some are, of course, black. Some are, of course, not. They're, mulatto, mixed people, or they're almost
right. So the reason I'm bringing this up then is, how would you then apportion, say, the history in Spain that belongs to Africa? Mm-hmm. How would you then divide up what belongs to Africa proper and what belongs to these non-black populations?
Well, you mean the non-black populations that were in Spain?
Yes.
Well, there were actually when there's different people talk about Moors different ways, and actually there were several dynasties that were not African or not Black Arab in Spain. Of course, there were the Slavs. They had Slavic dynasties. You had Persian world dynasties. You had the Gothic. I mean the Spanish. You know the Islamicized Spanish people that were also there. So yeah. So I talk about Moors in Spain as the Moors in Spain. I don't talk about Moors, Spain being Moorish, but most Spaniards, I guess, would talk about, the Muslim Spain in general being Moorish.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
as far as the African populations that were there, I mean, there were several predominantly African dynasties. Of course, the Masmuda, which was the Almohade dynasty. There was the Tuareg dynasty of the Sanhaja Lamtuna, as they're still called, the Ramadan, and not only Sanhaja, but the Sanhaja vassals or client tribes that went with them were Songhai. So the Almoravids and the Almohads and the original population of Berbers that went in with the Arabs in the Umayyad period would be considered, the bulk of the African population. And they do say that almost 1 million Moors, not Moors, because people have different views, but 1 million Berbers went into Iberia, into the Iberian Peninsula. 900 and some thousand of Berbers, who we know were the Zenata populations of the Gawawan, and those people are now called, they're called Zagawa now. In Spain, there was a Waga or Azawad, and you have the, different other Zenata populations like the Ifrain, who are now called Ifrain Tuareg or Beni Ifrain, as they were called then. And you had Masmuda, who I'm still a little confused about because they were described as stocky built and of course black skinned, both in the Fatimid soldiers and as the Berbers. Abu Shama, and several other, an Iranian, Nasir Khusrau, and Ibn Butlan describes I'm sure you might remember the black women in, or no, maybe that was in the second. See, in this second article I did, there is so much unbelievably, what do you call it? You cannot retract that information. You cannot, in other words, you cannot argue with what's in there because you had several people calling the Berbers the Masmuda black, for example. And then you had other people calling the Berbers, black sons of Ham, like the Al-Damashki, called the Berbers and the Batians, the Copts and the Ethiopians, Zanj. They used to call them black sons of Ham, So I wish it wasn't so hard for people to download that article. Apparently, people can't, unless you subscribe to it or something, you can't get it. But and I talk about where the slaves came into North Africa and how geneticists have gone in and in those very same towns that the slaves were brought in from Europe, started analyzing their DNA and saying, oh, the Berbers of such and such Meknes were had a lot in common with the Europeans. No, that's where the bulk of the European Andalusian slaves came in from. Well, even that wasn't even Andalusian time. That was even afterwards. You had the Moulays that were bringing in people into that area, into Meknes, by the tens of thousands. Okay. They literally, that's why people need to look at the narratives, the slave narratives from North Africa. They talk about the different populations of Europe that were brought into North Africa and into Niger or Niger and, below the Sahara. So, but yeah. And I did an addendum. I'm not sure if you saw it, Mr. Walker, or on academia.edu. I did an addendum to.
I haven't seen this. No, I haven't seen this.
Yeah, you should go there and you'll see what I'm talking about, like the inability people are going to have to say, oh, the Moors were not. Because there's a lot of scholars saying the Moors, I mean, even black because they don't know the Moors are black.
Yeah.
Or that the Berbers are black, I should say. Because
I mean, let me just jump in here a little bit. Just as you've been collecting, I've been collecting information. So I can back a lot of that rubbish. Because what happens is the more you dig, you find people who shouldn't be saying anything saying things.
Right.
Just to give you one example, there is a crest of the Royal African Company, which the crest has got two Africans on it. And the same crest is described in Samuel Pepys's diary.
I'm sorry, whose diary?
Samuel Pepys. You know the guy that wrote his diary in London, 1660s. Very famous. Google him, Samuel Pepys, the most famous diarist in history. He describes the same crest, except he doesn't say two Africans. He says two Moors.
Oh, okay.
And I know for a fact we're talking the same crest.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Then you've also got, in the Bible, you've got the passage where it says, I am black and comely, O you daughters of Jerusalem.
Yep.
Yeah, you know that passage? Song of Songs.
That kind of was, yeah, but that's not in the, yeah, I know it.
Okay, so what? I looked at the word black, and it's the Hebrew word sachor, which means shiny black. And then you look at it in a Spanish dictionary, and that same word is translated as morena.
Damn.
Morena, sachor, and shiny black is the same word.
Yeah, it definitely was. Even in Ecuador and certain South American places today, if you say morena or moreno, just means the black person.
Yeah. So when Spanish people today say morena doesn't mean black, it means brown, rubbish. It's a direct translation of the Hebrew word sachor.
Well, yeah, back then it definitely was. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But see, that's another thing we have to, well, I try to tell people is that a lot of what's written in the Talmud or certain translations of the Bible was not written, could not have been written by the people of, for example, the Judeans, because the Jews themselves, according to 16th century writers, the ones in Khaybar, and places, other places in Arabia at least, were, well, their words were closer to black than any other color. So, you have several groups that went into Arabia that were Jewish, including the Persian or Judaized people later on into the Yemen and places of that sort, which is, when I say Persia, I'm talking about places now called Afghanistan and, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and northern India. It included a lot of those places, not just Iran. So my thing is right now, my project has been showing that the early people of Genesis were just basically a group of black peoples or populations in the far south of Arabia.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Yeah, on that subject, the detail that you went into with the ethno-history of the Moors, have you done a similar level of detail for the early people of the Middle East?
Yeah, let me just show you. I don't know. So this book, which is in the Princeton Theological Seminary, National Library of Israel, University Library of Israel, Stanford, and other, libraries, was published in 2020, and goes into the detail of where every population mentioned in Genesis originated and where they basically are. But I don't go into the African part. I don't go into the African side of things. But except for the East African, I do make the connection between the Makir of, for example, Southern Arabia and the Makir of Somalia and the different groups of Horites or, Hamumi and Isa and the Timan and different Southern Arabian populations that were mentioned up until colonial times in Arabia that are also found in Somalia, and also went across Africa, at a very early time. Different populations of Judeans and Israelites and Canaanites, Moabites crossed into Africa very, very, very early from that area. So, but the basis of my book is to show that early Israel was actually, and Canaan were actually south of Mecca, not in the Levant. So that's why it's kind of caused quite a, well, Saleebi's book, I should say, caused quite a stir, and a lot of backlash, because it was kind of explaining, well, why are hundreds of place names in the Asir, or, the which is part of the Yemen back then, but also in the Yemen, and when you can't find them in the Levant, and also, so a lot of people don't know that there is a kind of schism between what's called the minimalists and maximalists that are saying that the maximalists are saying that, the minimalists are saying that no, there's not evidence of an Israel in Canaan in the Levant. There's no real evidence that hundreds of thousands of people called Israelites ever lived there. There just isn't. I mean, that's dozens of scholars and biblical archaeologists now saying that, and people don't understand that. So what I did was discovered through Saleebi's book and through a few other sources, including the early medieval text writers, that the tribes that are mentioned in Genesis are actually Black tribes of Southern Arabia, some of whom are still there today, but of course, before the 16th century, basically all of Arabia was, mainly African, like Diop had said. It was mainly, he calls them Negro population. I'll just use the word Black, affiliated with Black Africans, different groups of Black Africans also inhabited Arabia, and still do occupy the Jordan Valley today, the Gower, except that, of course, people try to say that those people are, even though their names, they still have names like Kenana, the Canaanites, and all the other names that were in Hijaz, and in the Yemen and in Sinai. And although those places were described in medieval times as Black, even, the Balka or the Darum, the area of Palestine, and all those places were described as Black, even in medieval times. So they try to say that these people are actually descendants of slaves or Egyptians that came as soldiers into the area, stuff like that. But so in this book, I showed, how actually these were an extension of the peoples of Hijaz and Sinai, who have the same names, and who came up from the Yemen in different times, and all Arabian sources speak to that movement of different populations from the south, like the Ghassan, who in the Bible are called Jakshan, and other Medianite peoples and other Israelite peoples. Benjamin are still there in the southern parts of Hadramaut, and see that, for example, the name for certain Somali Jews is Yabir, or Habir. Now the Habir are still a group in Southern Arabia as well, and they're part of a group called Benyamina, or the Benjamin. Okay, so I actually tied in these Benjamin with the Janaba tribe, or they were also called Gibeon, Gabaonians, or Gibeonites, peoples of Gibeon, and the Manaeans. That's why it talks about the Manaeans being the Benjamin being the father of Bela and connected to the Manaeans, because all those people were clustered in that area between Oman and the Tahama, which is the area across from Sudan in Africa, south of Mecca. All these people were there between 2000 BC and 1000 BC as the Israelites and Canaanites, and later on the names Manaean and Sabaeans stuck with them. But so the guy that wrote the foreword for this book is Brandon Wheeler, who is he's the head of right now he's the head of the University of Maryland's naval the director of comparative religion at their Naval Academy, at the U.S. Naval Academy in Maryland. But he's also a former Oxford lecturer, and so he wrote the foreword for the book, and I gave it also. I sent it to the guy, another top Arabian specialist, Dr. Robert Hoyland, who looked at it and said yes, he can see why Professor Wheeler thought it was fascinating, because he said, well, he didn't tell me why, but he said he can see why. And he said that, yes, he does see that a lot of the stuff in the book was plausible. So,
could you hold the book up to the camera and keep it steady? Because lift up a little bit, down a bit, down, freeze. Right. The African and Arabian origins of the Hebrew Bible. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me jump in and let me jump in to say something real quick. For some reason, Zoom had sent me a notice saying that we removed the 45-minute time limit for some reason, even though I set this for like 4 hours and 45 minutes. So just in case this shuts off, I'm going to make another one and then we continue. So I'm just saying that. So just in case.
Okay.
But I'm sorry about jumping in. Y'all keep building.
Okay.
The next thing I was going to ask was, you studied with Professor Bruce Williams, is that right?
Oh yeah. I never finished talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to say a whole heap about that.
Yeah. Well, at the time, of course, he was being he had just discovered, or a few years, I guess, before, had discovered Tasseni, which is an early pharaonic civilization south of Egypt that he was saying was actually the precursor of the pharaonic cultures of further north, in Ta-Kemet and or Kemet too. They were the ancestors, or the cultural ancestors of those people. So, but I mean, I wasn't so much there to study that as much as the connection between the Saharan peoples and the Nubian peoples. So, I did some independent, studies about that, and meaning the archaeology. He would give me books about the archaeology of Nubia, and I would make connections between the Saharan pottery and other symbols on the pottery, and in the Sahara, in the inscriptions and things. So, but yeah, I wrote to him also later. I can't remember exactly what he said about whether Cassidy was accepted or not. I'm not even sure about that. I have to look up what I sent him. But yeah, I mean, I studied under him, and then I also saw that, for example, that's when I started to figure out that the Wadabi, at least the Wadabi, Red Fulani, Pastoral Fulani, the hairstyles that they wore in the Sahara, in the Saharan, and in their heads was similar to that worn by people in East Africa, like the Rondili and different other so-called Cushitic peoples. So for back then, I was pretty certain that those people were not necessarily originally Niger Congo speakers, but connected to the East Africans. And then what comes to find out later on, that now they are finding out that at least biologically or genetically, the Fulani actually seem to be more connected to East Africans than other West Africans, or the Wadabi. The Wadabi and the Fulani, I think in general, are connected to East Africans. And then I started noticing also that even their, their scars and their scars are similar to that of the Afar people. So in one of these books called that I used in the first article I wrote on the Moors for Dr. Vincent, it's called Bornu, Sahara, and Sudan.
I've got the book.
Oh, okay. That's where I noticed, Palmer's talking about the connection with the Fulani to the name Berzea Japhelet. I don't know if you remember that part. Barzu Fulatani, mentioned by I think not Corpus, but another early Roman emperor or something. And he somehow made a connection between Barzu Fulatani and Berzea Japhelet, who were part of the tribe of Ashur, the Israelite Ashur, who I later come to find out were the Asher, ancient South Arabian and medieval South Arabian Asher, who with Jada or Gad, the tribe of Gad, had moved up north into the Hijaz. So they apparently had moved across into Africa because, Asher are Israelites, and then there were also people called the Ashur or Asuriani, who were supposedly the brothers of Median or children of Median, I forget which one, and Ugadas, who came across Africa. And I had made a connection between the names of those tribes and the ancient Asuriani that were fighting against the Romans, who turned out to be the Tuareg. So, different. I just started putting all these different things together and noticing that why is it always Africans that seem to have the names of these people? So things didn't make sense. And then, I started reading Kamal Salibi's book, The Arrival Came from Arabia. And I said, well, these places now that he's talking about were occupied exclusively by Black people 1,000 years BC and even 2,000 years ago, or maybe even 600 years ago. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of the people in modern Yemen are actually descendants of, biologically descendants of other people, Persian people, Turkish people, and other people that are mixed with the original Arab people. Because if you go back even to Ibn Khaldun, he says that the Yemen and the Najd, or Central Arabia and the Hijaz, belong to the Sudanic zones, or the first and second zone of the people. I don't know if you're familiar with the climatic zones of the Arabs. They talk about, some places were hot and black, and then the other places. Yeah. So that was mainly considered part of the second zone. Well, the Yemen was part of the first zone, actually, of humanity, but the Jed usually was considered part of the second zone, and the Hijaz too, even darker than parts of Egypt. So, and then certain times, because they brought in a lot of miners from Iran, a lot of like what they called Najians at that time from Iran, and Abna. I mean Abna. But anyway, the foreign people from Iran were a large part of the Jed population after a certain point. And the same thing happened. So just recently, in the last 5 years, I've discovered where some of the cultural, for example, the hats that the people of the Assyria wear. The Persian people wear these flower hats that are the exact same as the people of northern India today. So, and also these long hats of the Yemenite women are the same as the Tocharian hats of Central Asia. So a lot of the culture in Yemen is essentially, it's not, what, I'm going to turn my light on because I think it's getting a little dark outside. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that Arabs up until even the 600 years ago in the Hijaz were described as Black people. The Chinese describe them as very dark purple people.
Can I just jump in? Can I jump in?
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah. I'm in London, as you know. Large numbers of Turkish people in London.
Oh, okay.
And the Turkish word for a black person is Arap.
Arabi, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have that in my new article on fear of blackness on Morse. There's a lot of new
And
stuff.
also, I went through a Turkish dictionary, and the word Arap is, you know, that you've got, what word could you replace it with? You could replace it with the word fella, which means Egyptian, and it also means a black person. And you could replace it with Zenchi,
Zanchi.
which also
Zench?
means a black person.
Black
Yeah,
person.
Zench. So as far as a Turkish person is concerned, to be an Arab, you have to be black.
Yeah. And not only there,
Yeah.
as David Goldenberg had and other people had mentioned, in Russia and in Yiddish, the word Arab means, in Greek, I think too, the word Arab just means the black name. You know, it's not even a question. And I showed, I have pictures that I showed on my Facebook page and even on the Afro-Asiatics blogspot of the Estonian portrayals of the Arabs, you know, the Saracens that came on ships to visit them. And they're not even brown, they're black. They're black people, they're not even brown people. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you published these images?
Yeah.
Yeah, you published them.
on
Okay.
Afro-Asiatics blogspot and on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
And I started to mark exactly where I got them from and, you know, what age they are. These are medieval paintings. They're not even, you know, they're not in 16th century, 17th, these are like 13th and 14th century paintings of Saracens and, you know, even I believe we discovered the giant Saracens that people were talking about that apparently occupied Sicily and other parts of Europe, you know. So these people called the Azd from the Tehama and Asir actually were, and Hijaz, also called the Ansar, or the companions, were, a lot of them were giants. And when I'm saying giant, I'm talking about not just tall, but huge. And the reason I know that, besides the fact that it says that they were huge in Arabic, in black giants, black skinned huge people, but I saw with my own eyes before I guess I was about 18 or 19, I was in the YMCA, and I saw there a guy from I later found out was Central Arabia, and I was like in shock because the size of his bone structure was just so much bigger than the average, you know, African or even African American. And I was asking where he's from, and also his nose was like wide, like wider than most. He almost looked more like a Mesolithic man rather than the modern kind of man. He looked like something from, you know, much earlier period. And I'm like, where are you from? I said, are you from the slaves or something? Were you brought up? You know, I was 18, I didn't know, you know, it was kind of embarrassing now, but he got offended and said, no, well, where I come from, all the people look like me. And, you know, and he worked at Al Karj at the time. And later I found out that the area he was talking about was called Al Od. And this Al Od is Lud of the Bible. And this is where a lot of the people in Central Arabia and the Dawasir people were black, also described as black giants by colonialists in the southern part of Najd, or Wadi Dawasir, also called Pelaj al-Falaj, Peleg of the Pelegites, you know, the place where Peleg lived, a brother of Khatan, I guess, or Eber, I forget which one. But anyway, yeah, so after I would see these people in New York City, where I was living at the time, then I would see people like, you know, and then I would read about these people, like, oh, you know, I didn't, now that he was not playing with me, there were a lot of people in Central Arabia that were black giants. Not only that, I saw these, when I got married, I was living in Brooklyn, Atlantic Avenue, where a lot of the Arabs hung out. I saw these very small black people, okay, that were Arab, and they weren't like, you know, they didn't look like the I don't want to say the wrong word.
They didn't look like the average black person on the street. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm saying the very small people in Africa, not the
The
Komisan.
pygmy?
Yes, but we're not supposed to say that anymore. I forget the name. What's the name of Mr. Walker? Do you remember?
I've seen toi,
Yeah,
batois,
toi,
and so on.
toi.
Yeah.
Okay. They were literally that size. And the reason I know that is because, okay, they were below my shoulder, but then when I looked down, I saw they were wearing high heel sneakers.
What?
I swear. And I'm like, oh my God, what the heck? And I remembered some guy from the Bilen people of Eritrea telling me, oh, they have in Jazan and on the Asir, they have people they look like me, meaning him, but they were much smaller. And then when he said that, I didn't realize they were that much smaller. But if you go to the colonial writings about the Arabs and about Khaybar, for example, what do they say? They say the people were 5 cubits in height and very small with feminine voices and closer to black than any other color. And that's where this guy Hadani, Joseph Hadani, or the black Jewish adventurer, the medieval era, that wrote about being a prince from Khaybar, where there was a tribe of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben. Okay? So he was described as a dwarf, as black as a Negro. Okay? So a lot of the stuff I don't have in the first article, but I put in here, and in the Fear of Blackness and on my blog and stuff like that. But and then I went to discover, well, who are these Manasseh tribes he was talking about? Who was this Manasseh? Who was Gad? Who was Reuben? Come to find out, all these people, I'm reading about the Sulaim bin Mansur and Hawazin bin Mansur, Salim and Suleiman bin Mansur, all these clans of Mansur people. The word Mansur comes from the word Manassir. It's the Manassi or Manassir tribe of the Yemen that came up to this area. Okay, these were the tribe of Manasseh. And when they said that all the tribes of the Hara, all the people of the Hara were as black as the lava, this is who we're talking about, the Israelites. And that is why even 600 years ago, Al-Makadisi or Makadisi, I always confuse these two.
Al-Idrisi?
No, Makadisi or Makrizi. There's two people, one's Makadisi and one's Makadisi, and they were born, several, I forget which one it was, but the one born about 15th or 14th century said that in Egypt, you could not distinguish between an Israelite, a Copt, an Abyssinian, and a Nubian.
I've got the quote.
Oh, okay.
I've got that quote, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I put that all over the web. I put all of these different things over the web, and people,
I've got that.
I'm glad that you have. But so I just put 2 and 2 together, and not only that, they talked about what's the name for the Sulaim in Egypt. It was Shalmai, which is of course the Judean Shalmai. I don't know. There's just so much, and so I did that with not only the Manasseh tribe or the Manasseh, but for all of the Israelite tribes. So in this book, that's why people are like, "Wow, it's fascinating," And I just put it up on. I put just a short article about the Nahum, who was a people of Southern Arabia, like every other Israelite people. And their connection to the Iyal Mansur, who were of the Hamdan people, Hamadan in southern Yemen. And by the time, I don't know if you're familiar with academia.edu or edu, where a lot of scholars go to, publish and stuff. And other people go there too, but so by the time I was.
By the way, I think my man wants to jump in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian.
I have a quick.
Okay.
I have a quick question, and then y'all can build some more. Okay, you said the Mansour that comes from Manasseh, and they're black people, right?
Well, the Sulaim bin Mansur were black, and many of the Hawazin are still very dark as the Hara. And one thing before you ask your question,
Mhm.
just to say this, just to show you how it can be shown what they were talking about. Now you go to the Hara, what do you see? What did Al-Jahid say? He said that not only the people are black as lava, but the lambs and the sheep and animals. So you go to the Hara today, you will see the cattle and the sheep and animals black, but the people now, some people are black, but a lot of people aren't black. You know what I'm saying? So it just shows you that what Al Jahiz and these other people were talking about. Because he's not the only one that said that
Okay.
about the Sulaim. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My question is, since you say that the Mansour, like those were, believed to be, black at one point, right? Um, are you familiar with the document called the Tariq El Fatash, the
Mhm.
history of the land of the blacks?
Yep.
Now, we know historically that the Al Mansour dude, the head Sultan of Morocco, was like, half Arab, half black person, right? And when they basically destroyed Timbuktu, those gangsters and stuff,
That was
they
a talk. Well, anyway, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
they had described the great chancellor of Timbuktu as Al Sudan, meaning
Mhm.
like black. So
Mhm.
if the people in the north were all, that particular tribe was already black, why would they describe their own
Well, this is one
brethren?
thing that that historians, people that want to be historians, have to remember to separate chronologically the different time periods, because when you're talking about, for example, the 1500s or 1400s, of course, you find the Masmuda being described as black skinned by Abu Shama and by, like I said, Ibn Butlan and other people, and the Berbers being described as black. But now, a few centuries later, you had hundreds of thousands of Andalusians and other people from Spain being brought in. And I wrote this one particular quote, another good one that you should write down, Mr. Walker, or you should try to find it from this book called, I'll have to find the name of the book, but it's about Sigil Massa, which is in North Africa, one of the famous town trading centers. Okay, so Ibn Tumart, who was the leader of the Masmuda, said that in his time, the Masmuda children were coming, a lot of them were coming out lighter than their fathers because of the Almoravids sending in their slave soldiers, European slave soldiers, in to collect taxes from those people in that area of Tumart and, all those North Moroccan places. And he said they were changing, that was partly what was changing the color of the Masmuda people. Now, not only there, but, many other places in North Africa had the same thing going on. You had whole groups in Tunisia and, they said the slave pens of Tunisia and Libya were filled with Europeans. Just like now you find slaves, but they're being brought from, Africa and other places. But at that time, a lot of Europeans were, and they said that, and this is what I read in a recent book about this, the white slave trade. I forget which one it was, but he said that the Tuareg and other Berbers would bring would raid these slave pens and bring these people into further south where they never see, unfortunately, their kinsmen again. Now, only recently have I started reading different narratives about the Agatis and other places in the Sahel, where it does talk about these white slaves, like especially they had their own, they could write, some of these people were monks, were Christian, not monks, but fathers that were able to write. And so they were talking about their treatment and how they were bringing all these, the Tuareg, because they said the names of what these people were called. And these Tuareg people were bringing in Europeans from North Africa into the Sahel. So yeah, so I mean, one way or another, all this information is coming out. Be able to confirm or verify that everything that was said earlier. By J. Rogers.
Well,
About.
can I jump in? Can I
Yeah,
jump in?
sure.
The quote by Ibn Tumat, have you published that? Is that quote in your
Oh, that's already been published. That's published by in this book, and I published it I took that quote from the book. What is it? Sijamasa.
Yeah, and
That's
is that on
already
your
up.
Facebook? Is that on your Facebook page?
It's in my but it's hard to find. It was like probably a year ago or something. But on the Aphorisatics blog spot, I put a lot of this stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that has a lot of. I mean, that was what the Facebook was based on. The Aphorisatics blog spot, and the Aphorisatics blog spot arose because I used to go on Egypt Search and argue with people like, including neo-Nazis and other people, about the who the Egyptians were, who the Moors were, who the Arabs were, and a lot of African Americans, of course, did not know that the Arabs themselves were basically black people, and that when you talk about the Arab slave trade, you're talking usually about other Middle Eastern people, not about the early Arabs or. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Arab.
And similarly, a lot of the anti-black racist statements weren't written by Arabs. They were written by Persians.
Right. That's what I've been saying, telling people that written by.
That's a fact. Yeah.
All of these hadith, all the hadith commentaries, a lot of them were written by Persians and other and then slaves, in fact, descendants of slaves. Slave. What do you call the slaves? Starts with an M.
Mamelukes.
Yeah, Mamelukes were writing a lot about the blacks, but fortunately they wrote a lot about who the Berbers were. I mean, almost all of them were not Arabs. That's what was crazy to me, is that and that even that's why I like what Tariq Berry did the in his Unknown Arabs. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Either.
Yeah,
Well, he wrote. Yeah,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, he wrote this book. He's like he's Arab from some country. I forget which one it was. He told me once. I texted him, but he's more like Islamic scholar, but not necessarily in the Western sense of the word, Western academic sense. But he does have a lot of stuff. A lot of quotes by people like the Hobby and Halabi, and that's where I found out about the Lisan al-Arab, and all that these early medieval writers were saying about what the Arabs looked like, and what the Berbers looked like. So they definitely said, for example, in the 9th century, I think it was I forget his name. Some Persian author said to the Abbasids, "Stop trying to pretend that you're more Arab than Muhammad's people who are still black." He said, "Stop it." And I have that in my. I said that. I think I have it in here too. I put every last quote about the blackness of the Arabs in here. I think in a chapter called. I think it's called the problem with the tints of Kedar. The tints of Kedar. Rather than the tents of Kedar, I said the tints of Kedar. And then I went and showed how every single population of Arabians was really, described as black. From the Nabateans and the people in Lakhmid era Christian Arabs, how they were all described as black. And the Ansar, what they said about them, and how people distort, for example, they try to say that the Ahabish in Hijaz were Abyssinians. The Ahabish were not Abyssinians. They were different tribes of the Arabs who were related to Kuza or Kaza. Okay, so Kaza, Khazraj, and Aus were three of the major tribes of the Ansar groups that were in Hijaz, from which the Ansar came, or companions of the Prophet, right? And these groups were, of course, the early ancestors of, I mean, they were mentioned in this area back in Hatshepsut's time, in the Red Sea area. They were the major branch of the Kaza, Ahabish, and they included the Hun al Khuzaima, Hun or Kara al Kara, who are still black in places like Oman, or at least in colonial times they were described as looking like the Somalis and the Beja, right? And other tribes of Hudhail, bin Mudrika, who are the Hudhail was like supposedly the uncle of Kanana, or I'm sorry, Quraysh bin Khuzaima, something like that. But anyway, all these tribes were closely related peoples of the Kanana. And the word Kanana, of course, was the root of was the reason why the Canaanites became referred to as black, because this is the group that moved northward into Syria, and at that time, they were known to be the people that were mentioned in the Old Testament. They were considered to be, and they still are black. The Quraysh themselves are still black in Sinai.
For real?
Yeah.
That's a shock.
Quraysh. I mean, I don't know why people don't know this. I mean, I was sent pictures of them, of the Garasa and the Quraysh. And I said, are you sure these people are not? Again, it's hard to believe because nobody knows that the Arabs are black. Nobody knows the Salim. And, well, a lot of people know the Salim too, because that was one of the earliest things to come out. The Salim, what Al-Jahi said about the tribes of the Hara. And the Hara is not just a small area of Medina. It's a whole, it's a whole thousands of kilometers that extend into Syria. And there's also parts of the Hara in the Yemen. There's 8 Haras extending from the Yemen to the Levant. So, the Utaiba of the Hawazin bin Mansur, his brother of Hawazin, his brother of Sulaim bin Mansur. All these tribes were originally, the same people, and all have lineages or ties. There's a good article called "The Banu Sulaim" by a Michael Lecker. I think he's at the University of Tel Aviv, and it's like a book long, and just like my article on my dissertation. This is like a dissertation. It's considered a dissertation. But this was published by Mellon Press, which is like they publish just a lot of authors that are not on subject matter that's not very contemporary and stuff, or not very well known, eclectic stuff, a lot of eclectic stuff. And the head of it was a former Harvard Divinity School professor. So he's the one that said, he took my article, dissertation, and he actually got it reviewed. And also I got, gave him my review by Professor Wheeler. And he said, well, look, I had a university called Mellon University that was established in Barbados by the British, and the guy, this guy's not black, by the way, but he's white, but by the British Crown back in the 60s, I guess, when they were decolonizing like that. And he's the one that actually said, well, if you do the dissertation, we'll just give you a PhD from my university. So that's how, the PhD came about. But I don't, before that, I really didn't consider having a PhD to be necessary. But now, I mean, it's helpful, when we look for jobs and stuff like that. But because, for example, when I went to a lecture on the Moors in Philadelphia about several years ago, there was a guy there, an African American, he had 4 PhDs, he said, and one was from the University of Barcelona. Yes, sorry, Perry, don't forget your questions.
No, I went like this. 4 PhDs.
And he was arguing with me about the Tuareg being Moors, Almoravids. He was arguing with me. He was against that, and he was also arguing that.
Isn't that established fact?
Oh no! Well, no, not until I said something about it.
I mean, I thought that was standard established
Oh
fact.
no, you could see up until 10 years ago, you don't see anything mentioned about the Tuareg in there. No.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I've always thought that was
Basically,
fact. Okay.
no, just because Dr. Van Cerner had a Tuareg on his cover, I mean, that was not, no, that wasn't accepted. I mean, still there's some people that apparently don't know about it. And when they do know about it, because I was married to a Kabyle, right? And one of his in-laws or cousins in-laws was the head of the Berbers over here. And he's like, the Tuareg are just, they adopted the Berber, whatever. They're not real Berbers. I'm like, well, who's the real Berber? The Vandals? You? I mean, 'cause he looks just like Kemal Ataturk.
Kamal, who?
Ataturk, who was the head of Turkey a long time ago. But anyway, yeah, you have that. You had Berbers, nationalists that don't believe that the Berbers were black. They believe that they are, the Perscan Berbers believe that they're the true Berbers, of course. And the Spanish too, they didn't believe it. They were black Moors. They believed that they were like, that they were brought in as slaves.
But even the Spanish one, it's easy to destroy. What I use as teaching material is
Well,
Yeah.
no, wait a second. Not just the Spanish, but in England, just because they showed a picture of, the tawny Moors, they had this thing, especially in England, because that's what my pure blackness thing was, argument was against the English scholars, so-called scholars in British literature, saying that the Moors were not really black; they were Mauritanians, and at that time they were only using the word black in a symbolic sense. I mean, I have a whole group of statements from British scholars saying that, and I, argue against why this could not be true and stuff like that, because the different Arab scholars that are, it's not Arab scholars, Arab authors who observed who the Berbers were and the fact that they were black and all that stuff. I'm gonna forget my thought, Perry. Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Get your thought out the way.
No, I was gonna say something before that. Oh, this PhD guy at this masjid in the African American masjid in Philadelphia was arguing that Muhammad was not from the tribe of Quraysh. And that's when I said, oh, well, forget it. I'm not even going to PhD. I'm not worried. Forget it. If you don't even know that Muhammad was a Qurayshi, then forget it. I could not believe that. And I literally had to go back on my blog and say, did I miss something in all my reading? Did I miss that Muhammad wasn't really a Qurayshi? He's not from the tribe of Quraysh. But anyway, so I hate to bring that up because he's now another Perry. He's not alive. Not with us anymore. So, but so Perry was getting on me for saying something about it and somebody else that had passed on. But
yeah, well, I want to get know you. It was just you opened my eyes to
yeah.
Oh,
anyway, so what was your question?
My question was because we still talking about the Tuareg.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that I don't mean to get into politics, but it still gets into the Tuareg and stuff. Every time I look up the Tuareg people with the veils, they a bunch of as John Henry Clark would say, desert pimps. And but I keep seeing that the lighter ones are ethnically cleansing the Heriton down there. Like there's a book called
Well, they're not. I think see, this is the problem: is that African Americans, especially, they don't. When you say Tuareg, because there's not really Tuareg in Morocco. There's not really that many Tuareg in Morocco. There are the Sahrawi people who are both. Some of them are dark and some of them are light, and they're But if just because you wear a thing does not mean that you're Tuareg. There are people that are wearing now for tourists. In fact, some of the tourist pictures are showing people wearing the Berber headdress and then some veil. But like I told you before, the Tuareg are known by the noble Tuareg are known by their indigo veils and headdresses and wear, but also they tend to be dark skinned, especially the nobles, especially the ones, if you go to Libya, if you go to Algeria, if you go to, so I don't know when you say light skin, I've never seen that really light skin.
Well,
If
the
they're wearing a
ones that
white, if they're wearing a white, especially if they're wearing a white thing, that means they're like descendants of slaves or not, not pure Tuareg.
so those are the Slavic, I guess, people that the Arabs,
Well, it wasn't
brought
just
down.
Slavic people. It was all kinds. It was French. It was, I mean, the Franks. It was like I said, the Turks. I mean, the Circassians came in large numbers into Egypt and other places in Morocco. They're still being brought in, the women. I mean, I think, or at least in the colonial times, they were still being brought in large numbers.
Mm.
But yeah.
But do you get the whole, but like the slavery and like the Mauritania part? Because like that's what I'm like asking about, like, because
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
they're
There
like,
are. Yeah. Now there are different Berber groups that are mulatto and fair skin. Banu Hassan in Morocco that are. I mean, they're barely Arab, but biologically. But yeah, they're treating black people. Yeah, they have slaves. But even before that, though, there were people called the Trarza and the Hassan or Makil Arabs that were basically, they look like Sudanese. So they always had this problem with the Sudanese or the black Arabs, the original Arabs in North Africa, against the settled peoples. And the same thing with the Wodave and the Tuareg. There are still fights between the settled peoples in the Sahel and these people and the nomad people. Not really a question of, I mean, the nomads, of course, being the warriors, consider themselves more, better than settled people or agriculturalists. They always have. That's since biblical times. That's why I brought that up about the, in Fear of Blackness in the West African Review. I talk about the Tuareg. That's a whole caste system that's been since biblical times. The Midianite rulers were Amalekites who had the Kenite metallurgists, agriculturists, Hamathites as slaves, or not as slaves, but as vassal client tribes. So you have both the client tribes, and then you have, well, now you do have slaves. That's an additional caste of people too, that aren't even Songhai, they're from other people, equally, and other people. But that's been going on for thousands of years, and it was amongst different black people.
So
And yeah.
so it don't have nothing to do with like race, because that's what I always see when
Well,
it comes to.
now, I mean, now it might, because now the tendency is for these. See, the Tuareg have been taking white women slaves for thousands of years, because you go back to Claudius and he talks about the Anu Samani, as they're now called, or Nasamonians, taking slaves, Roman slaves of the Levant in, was it northern Algeria? And he said, creating hideous hybrids, their words, the Roman words, in the book, in North Africa. So that's been going on for years. But the difference between the Tuareg and other people, and even the early Arab people, is that they used to often end up marrying their slaves. So that's why you have some of the, Tuareg or like look more mulatto, or than the than the vassals. But the vassals aren't really slaves. They do have, they did have slaves, but the vassals, like the Songhai people like that work among them, aren't considered really slaves. Yeah, and then there are the slaves though. So all these people have slaves, not only the nomad people, but across the Sudan. That was great. In Bornu Sahara, in the Bornu Sahara, and the Hausa area, and the Akan area, a lot of these people I mean, a lot of times the slaves were prisoners of war, but their economies were often built on slavery. So, yeah, some of the time, a lot of the time, it was built on slavery, or at least on in the later period. When that was back. They closed off. Supposedly, according to the king of Middle Eastern studies, Bernard Lewis, they closed off the um, Constantinople white slave trade. After the fall of that, then they started taking more Africans as slaves. After the 1400s, and the rest of the Atlantic slave trade started, so that they started the Africans themselves, as we've all heard, started selling away other African peoples. Then they weren't necessarily related, like African women try to say they're related. Oh, they sold their own people. Usually not. Usually it's people that were of different, ethnic groups, and they had hundreds of ethnic groups in these places. But so that's why I don't get into slavery, and that's why I don't know, because when people start looking back, and they are already starting to, especially the white people, start looking back at what happened in Africa and what happened to the white people being brought into Africa, and it just didn't start in the 1400s. It started, thousands of years ago in the Roman era. Then things are going to be made even. They're going to say, But the only problem is now is there's still a distortion of what happened. There's this narrative of black as only slave, or black as the noble savage, or the noble agriculturalist, which I think just as bad. But I am very happy to hear that or see that all these societies across Sudan, northern Sudan, and Sahel were filled. There are hundreds of towns, of stone towns with, like Mr. Walker. I saw him saying something about toilets on the second floor, and just highly developed civilization that they're trying to wipe out. I was just trying to, that's why I wrote that thing about the National Geographic in Africa. The study of how they classified Africans, and I was going to do one as looking at the dichotomy of the way they looked at North Africans, in recent times, and Africans in recent times, because they created this big, who knows? Watch. Who knows what an African house looks like? Of those watching us, I bet you 5% of people watching us, who will be watching us, know.
As much as that, gosh.
Maybe not as much. Yeah, you're right. So, because I, having been involved in this research for many years, I found it hard to find a house or know that these people had, what do you call it? Like the Romans had marble floors in some areas,
Yeah.
south of Egypt, in Chad and places like that. It's ridiculous, So, fortunately, we have to look at. We only have a few.
Can I just jump in there? Can I jump in?
Yeah.
One of the things that really helped my research was I found out that there are maybe a dozen serious books on ancient African architecture.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Go ahead.
No, that's it. So in other words, so what I did was made sure that when we ruled was as many of those monuments as I could get in were photographed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So I do have to look at the book.
I told you that.
I was telling Perry, I don't know with a name like When We Ruled, I'm not sure if that's going to be my thing, but yeah, no, but if it's based on that, because that's what I'm saying, Gary say that I called one of these guys that wrote something about African architecture when I was at the University of Chicago. His name was, he was like 90 years old. I mean, he was like very interested in why I called him and how I found out about him. Very prominent Africanist archaeologist.
What's his name?
Can't think of his name, but I mean, I'll Starts with a D. That's all I remember about it.
Mm.
Starts with a D.
Or Basil Davidson.
No. Is he an archaeologist? No,
He
not
was
him.
a
No, no,
journalist.
I know who he was, but I'm just saying. Are you talking to me? Perry? Was that you,
Uh,
Perry?
he was a
You
a
don't have to tell us.
journalist.
You don't have to tell us who he was.
Oh,
We're already down with the program. No, but I'm glad you know about him. But no, but this guy was like no, not Desange. I forget who he was, but he was British, and he was like a professor emeritus. He was still in America writing. He was still yeah, alive at the time, but he's probably long gone now because he was like 90 when I called him. And I was like so happy. That's why I called him, because he was saying all this stuff about they were like living the same way Romans were, almost a lot of these places. And I'm talking about before the medieval era, before the Songhai and Mali and stuff. And then, if you look at the Garamanchis and the fact that they had, well, all these towns basically were the later Sudanic civilization was basically based on the technology of those kind of people, the Garamantes and Amphisantes, people extending between, Nubia and the Chad Basin and Gadamus. They had these hydraulic civilizations, which, and I'm sure the Egyptians probably had something to do with that, but the Egyptians and the Nabataklaya and the same things found in Arabia, where these people were. These megalithic societies too. Long before that, megalithic societies where everything's aligned with the stars and planets, astronomical technologies involved. So yeah, we have a long way to go in terms of study of these societies, but at least we have people like Mr. Walker here that are documenting it, and hopefully, while I'm focusing on the Raven side, he'll be looking at more on that area. But yes, Harry.
okay. We're at the third part of the interview. Now, I want to start off by saying that Dr. Dana Reynolds Marniche, you are extremely attractive, right?
I don't
So,
know.
you, I mean, you are extremely attractive.
I'm
Like,
glad that somebody that's old enough to be my grandson is calling me extremely attractive.
I mean, like I'm
Okay,
being so I'm being so serious. Like,
okay.
I even
Thank
showed
you.
my
Thank
mom
you.
like what you
Oh
look
yeah, you
like.
were saying that I'm young looking. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
my mama, she was like black no crack. So, like, what I want to know is like, well, I would say this too to be funny. If if you was my professor right now, I don't know if I'd be able to work. I'd be so distracted. I'd be like, Dr. Data.
It happens, believe me.
I'd be like, Dr. Data.
I had I had a student one time. I don't know where he's from. He wasn't like American or nothing. He might have been like Filipino or something. And he was in my class. And at the end of the and he used to stare at me and stuff. Right? And then at the end of the period of the semester, I went to look for his name, and it was not. He wasn't there. So he'd been in my class the whole time and just or he was no, it wasn't that it wasn't there. He wasn't taking it as a as a matriculated student. I'll put it that way.
Mm.
So I said, oh, okay. He must have been there just for a different reason. He was fascinated. I was laughing.
But
But
I want to know, like, what's the skin regimen you doing? Because I mean, you just look
salmon,
flawless. Like,
salmon.
okay, can you
And
demonstrate?
also,
Keep going.
no, salmon, fish.
Oh, salmon.
Salmon.
Oh, okay. Because I mean, you
That has
just
a
look
lot of
flawless.
ribonucleic acid. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I told you about my shamanic chanting practice.
Can you demonstrate that for us?
I can't really demonstrate it, but I can talk to you about it and we can do it. I mean,
Cause I just want to. I'm pretty sure all these sisters who gonna be watching this, they're gonna be like, I would be looking like, I would be looking like Dana, like what
Well, the
she
one
got
thing,
going.
yeah, the one thing that it does do is it does something, it, rejuvenates the cells. And we know that because there's been some research done on it, on the key. Well, it's key energy. It's a key energy practice, right? And the one thing, like I used to teach this in the martial arts center, and the one thing that some of my students would tell me is that there was, they would see their nails grow, their nails would grow harder and things of that sort. So yeah, you notice that right away. So it's very powerful in that way, but it's mostly powerful in bringing you in a synchronistic relationship to nature. So, for example, well, I don't want to sound, but see, one of the things I'm interested in the Afro-Arabian origins of the Bible is that they have this thing called Kabbalah, and the early Kahanim, or Cohens, Kahanim, were basically shaman priests, okay, that could make it rain, that kind of thing. They still have in South Arabia. They still have among these people like rainmaker type, or at least until the colonial period. I don't know what's going on now in Yemen, because it's Yemen, the Hadramaut area. But they were, they were definitely shamans. So, and a shaman is somebody who just, besides being in touch with the ancestors, that's what a lot of African, religion was about. Basically raise the energetic level to T energy or Holy Spirit energy. So this Holy Spirit energy is what the Christ, so-called Christ or Jesus, used to make certain things happen, to manifest things, and to rejuvenate the dead, that kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah.
I know the
So,
sister that's gonna be listening to this. They're gonna be like, I'm gonna remember what she's saying.
but for me, it's a very serious thing, this practice, because what it does is also a lot of the people that learn the practice, they start having experiences with their ancestors, or come the people that they haven't seen in a while will come to them in dreams or start showing up and tell them things, or because what happens is after we die, a lot of times, and then we come back, reincarnated, like the Quran says. What it does is it raises the level of your ancestors, and as well as your spirit guides, who are often your ancestors of a much higher level than we are. And and it puts us back in touch with nature and being able to manifest what we desire. Okay, so this energy is what the Christians call the Holy Spirit, and what in my practice they say it's the key energy, or chi, one key, universal. It's when the heaven energy, like heaven energy and the earth energy are united. So, and we contacted through, and this is, my practice is a Korean practice. It's not, not necessarily African, but I'm sure Africans do their own practice. I don't delve into the African because a lot of it, to me, is not healthy. It deals with like direct, it's like a lot of times you're asking the ancestors for help instead of God. So, and not only that, I mean, I have people sending me friending me with pictures of decapitated goats and stuff on their tables, and practicing magic, asking for money from people to practice, with that. So, and I know from experience dealing with Afro-Cuban things, for example, that it can be very dangerous when you're dealing with African, they call Santeria and all that stuff. I mean, I don't get into that. I mean, one time I had my I don't know, I guess it's my, you call my soul, pulled almost out of my body. I was struggling to keep it into my body, you know.
Mm.
When I was, I went to this, well, this time it was one time it was a capoeira band. They
Capoeira?
were capoeira band, but they were practicing the real, some kind of Brazilian, I forget what they call it.
Yeah, Angola. I do that. I've been
Brazilian,
doing that for about 3 years
the
now. So
Brazilian, okay, well, the Brazilian, something, but the music they were playing some drums, right? And
that's called
yeah,
the Atabaki. Yep.
well, they were playing some drums, and they're candomblé, they have different, forms, but uh, I was there with my son, who was like 1 year old, and all of a sudden, I mean, they were in a trance while they were playing. All these people, like five or six people, all of a sudden, all of their eyes at the same time moved and looked at me. They were not there. That was, some other, it wasn't even a Orisha. I don't know what that was. But I wouldn't, I mean, I was like trying to stay conscious, because their eyes were pulling me out. And I thought, was afraid I was going to drop my son and everything. And I heard that they can do this in India too. They can look, some of the holy people that walk around with their dreadlocks and stuff and just look at you and just, pull your soul right out of your body and like you were never there. And you're
Mm.
gone forever, kill you like that. But, I know they do that in Africa and they do it in the Caribbean and stuff like that, but I don't deal in
Mm.
that because of what some of the experiences I've had with it. That's one of them. So, but
Okay.
my experience is I've dealt with Japanese and Shintoism practices and now Chi practices. And they're also, I mean, some of that stuff you see on, what is it? Like Pokemon. There's Pokemon cartoons. You can see some of that stuff for real in their culture, in people that know how to do this. One of the reasons I had gotten into that was because in the Shintoistic part was because when my mom's friend had come over here and I was doing my Buddhist chant that my aunt had taught me. I have a lot of that Buddhist stuff in my family. And she put a pamphlet on my table and she was telling me that I was asking about the pamphlet and she was telling me, yeah, her brother could not light a match with his hand. So they're able to channel light energy, and just light match, start fires and things of that sort. That's part of the Shintoistic ancient practices. Which is why, in China, they don't even allow this kind of stuff. That's why, a lot of people, like that, what's this? It's like a cult now that developed because of it. Fun, I forget what it's called, but, China has put a stop to a lot of these practices where they practice the Tai Chi and the chanting and things of that sort because they know how powerful it is. The same thing over here when they used to tell the slaves not to look them in the eye because, they have this power of the eye. My dad said that to me, when I was growing up. Oh, you dare look at me, look me in the eye like that. But yeah, so Africans and, and I've also heard other things about people being, I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but people being, and this is from college educated Africans, people being turned into like animals and stuff like that. I don't know, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying that they saw with their own, they told me they saw with their own eyes, that their grandfather or something was a witch doctor, and so I don't know what happens, but I know there's a lot, and I saw something on a video that hit home too because of something my mom told me a long time ago about her astral traveling and what happened to her being used as like a flying carpet or something. And then I was watching this video a couple of years ago on it's Christian minister that's trying to get rid of these this negative spirits in Africa. It's not a documentary. It's just a church, and they have a lot of witch doctors that go to this place, and they'll be telling about what they do on the other side, and how they'll come try to take people's souls and stuff. Now I don't know if you believe in it, but they did say that one of the things they do is to use people, that are experimenting, I guess, as magic carpets. So that's where that comes from. That idea of the Aladdin and the magic carpet. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. All I'm saying is I don't mess with that African stuff. But and then other things, even in the sect that I was in, the Japanese sect, you had people coming from Africa in there, and then they would give them a light treatment, which was like almost exorcism, and you'd see things happen. And then these people would start talking in language, and a witch doctor would be saying, "Oh, I'm here, and you're burning me. But and some people didn't know the language. Or people would come from, in the Shinto practice. The reason I know this is real is because, like I said, people would start talking in the language of their ancestors that they didn't know, and say, "Oh, well, this person did this to me in this lifetime. That's why I'm doing this to you." So ancestor thing. I know it's funny. No, but it's very serious. Well, see, that's what Diop was talking about when he talked about, the ancestors of Europeans not being relieved yet, not being their anger not being resolved yet, or whatever.
You know what? You ever heard of it? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, because that's what in shamanistic practice, you deal a lot with, unsettled ancestors or related ancestral energies that have not gone to where they're supposed to be, and they're causing problems. In this life, it could be disharmony at work. It could be, you're being called a N-word by some European. It could be anything of that sort. A lot of there's something called spiritual arrangement. Okay, and that's what these practices, not only by Africans but by the Shintoists and the shamanists and all these Chinese and Japanese practices don't tell you the real reason behind it. The chi energy practice, but that's it. It deals with raising your energetic vibration so that your ancestors can also go where they belong, and the related spirits can go where they belong. Yes, go ahead.
Have you heard of the comedian by the name of Paul Mooney?
Probably have seen him. I don't know. It sounds a little familiar.
Paul Mooney had a joke where he said, white people, all that stuff about ghost adventures, all that type of stuff, that ain't real. Because he said, I'm gonna tell you, white people, there are no ghosts. There are no ghosts. Because if there were, slaves would come back and mess you up. Ain't no ghosts. So what you saying about?
Well,
what you saying about the
one thing? Listen. Let's take. This is what they told me in the Japanese place I was in. It says it takes 7 generations for ancestral retribution to come upon, that generation. So you don't know what's going to happen in the future. It might already be happening, But and there's another thing that, see, I had my grandmother's father went to the electric chair. Now he was a stepfather, but he was still, connected. So one time I went to this, I go to a psychic sometimes, right? And he was telling me, I said, what did my granddad do to deserve that? And he said, he didn't do anything. They just, they set him up. And I said, and then he said, and you know what? He's killed several people. And I said, that's why he went. He said, no. He said, after he was dead. So I'm not saying, I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just saying that, after you're dead, you can do a lot of bad. You can do good, but you can also do bad. If you're angry, if you die in an angry state, you can seek vengeance on people. But he was saying something like he killed several people that were related to these people responsible for him being refugees.
Oh.
So.
On
I
that
don't know.
note,
I don't know if it's true or not. I just know from my experience what's happened. One last thing I'll mention about that. So one of these things we have is ancestor trainings where we basically it's to bless or to raise a certain lineage, to purify them, a certain lineage. And one of the lineages I was supposed to do was that line that he's on. That I was kind of contemplating doing another line first. So one night, this is right before I was supposed to do the ancestor training thing, I started feeling all these, and I had forgotten all about them because my dad told me about that long time ago. These like electric pulses throughout my body for like several minutes, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And I said, oh no, oh my gosh. Okay, don't worry, I'll do you. You're next. I'll help you out. So those electric pulses told me that line of his needed to be done. His was not really like I said, he's like a stepfather. He wasn't the direct biological ancestor, but you have to do, related spirits too in my practice. But sorry to sound so, scary, but that's one of the reasons why I got rid of, I don't have a lot of problems that a lot of other people have today because of that, I think. And including aging as fast as other people.
I'm like, good Lord. Okay, I'm done. I'm done. It's just, I'm just like, oh my God, like, you just, like.
It becomes pain. People think you're, a lot younger than you are. They treat you a certain way. So I'll be 60 in September. So
you lying?
60 in September.
What?
Yep, my father was born in 1929. So in the end of the Victorian age. I might be am I older than you, Mr. Walker?
Yes, you are. Yeah. I'm 54, so.
Oh, okay, not much older, but still. No, I figured you were in your 50s. I figured you were in your 50s, Mr. Walker.
All right, we're nearing the very, very end. Robin, let me ask you a question. Would it be okay if I call you after this just for about 10 minutes over something?
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, we're nearing the
Has it been 4 hours?
No.
Oh.
I mean, do you I think we kind of what do you want to say?
This is one of the shortest interviews I've had. This is like, what are we talking? We start 2 hours, Usually it goes on at least 3 hours, but I thought you could say 4 hours. But all right. Well, I was going to aren't there any other questions concerning the Moors or the Arabs?
I do have some more, but okay.
Go ahead.
Getting tired?
No. I mean, it's late where I am, but here's the thing. Okay, but one question that I did have is, did you resolve the academic disagreement with Wayne Chandler that appears in here?
Well, I don't know about with him, but Dr. Finch called me up and said now he agreed because he went over there to Egypt and saw the paintings of the Libyans, and he said he could not find those fair-skinned Libyans. He went to that tomb of Seti, I think it was Seti too, or I forget which Seti it was. And he said he saw the Libyans, but he wasn't allowed to take pictures of them. And he said they were all dark brown. So I don't know. I mean, Dr. Van Sertima made up kind of like this fake controversy. And I said, why'd you do that? I mean, because because a lot of people did not know that the ancient Nebu and Tehenu and Temehu were in the main depicted as dark in color. You know, there are some that are fair, and then there are some that are also, like I said, like Dr. Finch said, they were basically repainted as to be, you know, fair. Well, in that painting, they're not. In the real painting, they're not. I don't know. So I'll have to go over there and see for myself one day. But um, yeah, no. Is he still even alive? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, he
Um,
is. Yeah, he is.
oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. So I don't know. All I know is that most people now know that are more in agreement with me, because if you look at the Saharan art too, it tends to show that the people that look like the Fulani or Dabi were there. They had the same hairstyles, and also the Tuareg, probably the Zagawa as well, because they were also nomads with camels and stuff. Um, so I mean, there's nothing really to argue about, really, because we know that. I mean, in other words, they don't. I should say that they don't have the evidence to show otherwise. They don't have evidence to show that there were um, a group of people white people called Zemahu, and a group of white people called Tehanu, because the majority of those people, if you look at the paintings, and I have some of them on Facebook page, and somebody sent me actually, of the Temahu, too, that are dark. They just look like regular Africans. You know? Now, Africans, but wear the Lydian headdress and hairstyle. And these cross bands that the Fulani still wear. But anyway, Mr. Walker, you need to look at my Afro-Asiatic Blogspot, because I have a lot on there about that subject. The Fulani or Wadabi and their connection to the ancient Libyans, and also the Tuareg and their connection to the ancient Amazigh, who are, I mean, they're basically the only, as far as I'm concerned, they are the Amazigh. That name was adopted in the 20th century by Berber nationalists. And the name Berber itself is just the language that's spoken by these people, which is not, in a lot of places, not even, they don't understand each other. So that's not me saying that. That's what other scholars are saying. Also, and on my blogspot, it shows especially the ancient Egyptian, both ancient Egyptian and the ancient. I have at least 20 or 21 posts, long posts with a lot of information about all this subject matter. So also, Perry, you need to look at it too, because you were up there putting on my blog spot the Wodabi. Oh, these are Tuareg.
No,
And
them black people.
I was about to block you.
No, them black people. I know. Look, this what happened, right? When me and Robin, we talk all the time, right? So
Okay.
I was asking him about the Tuareg people, right?
Yeah.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, let me jump in. You didn't go to the right part of the film.
See the black part?
And I gave you the minutes and the seconds to watch. And I know you didn't watch it. I gave you the minutes and the seconds.
Oh my
In other words,
God.
I did all the thinking for you. All you had to do was watch the thing.
That is so funny. I was like, uh-oh. I'm gonna get mad. I'm gonna get mad because people know better in my state to come and put the wrong name of ethnic group, especially with the Wadawi that I've been talking about for years. No, they're not Tuareg.
I thought they was cross dressing because they matriarchal.
That's not the bit.
No.
Here's a point. Okay, all right,
That's
Donna.
not
What it was this. It was a documentary that was made by an Englishman
yeah, about
called Michael Palin, and it was called Sahara. And there was a particular piece of film footage where there's a Tuareg caravan. I sent my man here the link, and then he wrote back to me to say, "What a beautiful people." And I could tell from him saying that they didn't watch the right bit of the video.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's funny. But see, that's the thing about only the one thing, Perry, I was going to tell you, if I'm going to be also like a mentor to you, you have to listen about how to research history and make sure you're, picking up the right thing. Because there are a lot of African Americans in particular going around and putting, mixing up the Fulani with the Tuareg and even the Tubu with the Tuareg, and just, it's just going to really make us look ridiculous after a while.
Yeah,
And
like
it's
a
important
certain
to.
somebody, like a certain someone, they made it, brought us down. Like,
Oh well, no, not that. I was telling Mr. Walker, I was telling him that certain people that were not really academically inclined used to go around putting people from India and saying, oh, these are the what would they say, like, see, original black people, they both had original African, both had straight hair and woolly hair. I mean,
What they would do is they'd mix up the Dravidians with the
yeah.
Seedis and then present them both as one population. Yeah, I've seen that.
Well, not just that, because the original Dravidians, if you look at the Dravidians, the true Dravidians, pure Dravidians have kinky or woolly hair.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were going around taking the Austric people who are like Dravidian, Austric, half Dravidian, half Austric, and putting them in in their books and stuff and saying, oh, well, these are, the original Dravidians. But I don't even like when they say the original Dravidians, because Dravidians, the original Dravidians don't have straight hair themselves either. But yeah, so that's one thing I don't want people to get confused, already. If I'm trying to straighten things out, I don't need African Americans coming around and and there's a few blogs that do that. They love to do that. They'll just put any African and say, oh, this is a Fulani, or just because they have a straighter nose or something. I don't know what the heck, but just very disrespectful, I think, to the Africans.
mm,
But
I can't
just,
believe you was about to block me over that. I was
I
asking a
mean, no, I wasn't about to, but I felt like it.
question. I'm like, I
I
just
said,
met
I said,
you.
I should teach him a lesson. I said, no, but
Like we talked for about 3 hours. I think we
yeah,
good now. Like we
that's
good
why I
now.
was like so mad, because well, so I don't blame you, Mr. Walker. I can see it's Perry, but so what, Perry, is your name? Is that your real name? Which is your real name?
My real name is Adrian Wiley.
The
Perry
way you
Perry
said that. Okay,
Perry
no problem. I can call you Perry.
Perry. That's my alias.
Okay.
I don't want people looking at what I be posting on Facebook. So it's like I
Oh, okay.
gotta disguise myself.
Hmm.
And
Like now, right?
I mean, no, like
No.
once like how like think, you'll know why.
Oh, okay.
You'll know why I got this on. You probably know why I got this on. Robin probably know why I got this on like this. So it, like I've been interested in like
Just remember, if you're gonna be a historian, there's certain things that you. I mean, I know you're an actor too, so
I
it's
was.
fine.
I'm
It's fine.
retired now. I'm retired.
But no, it's fine. You're young too, so do what you want to do. Everybody's free to do what they want to do. So
Man, I never thought that I have two of my mentors together in one sitting like this. I mean, like this is like just a dream come true. And I'm just happy now that I got my technology together this time, because a couple years ago I interviewed my OG, and I didn't and for some reason my Facebook Live wasn't working, and we had the greatest interview that no one will ever see.
mm,
We talked about everything, but some things we talked about, belonged off camera anyway, like me and you, when we talked and stuff, it's the stuff, belonged off camera, but like
yeah,
this,
maybe the reason why I didn't come on.
you said what?
Maybe there's a reason why I didn't come on.
They come on what?
Nothing didn't come out the way you wanted it to.
It was because I mean me and like Robin, we was talking about a prominent, person or whatever. It
Oh,
don't
okay.
even just like how me and you were and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And but I mean, I'm so happy that Facebook has like brought us together like this, and I wanted to really bring Robert along with me because he's a scholar. You know what I'm saying, and he knows a lot more about the Moors than me. Because for real, you
Well, I think
know,
most people alive probably know a lot more than you, Karen.
I'm
You're
saying like,
young. You're 20. What are you, 23?
yeah, I'm 23. I
Unless
just,
you, I mean, unless you were like me studying it when you were like elementary school, but I don't
oh
think.
yeah,
Oh,
I
you
was
were.
reading I read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was like 7.
Oh, but that's
So
not the Moors. I'm talking about.
I
Yeah,
mean, I'm just saying I've always been reading and stuff
historically
like
inclined.
that.
That's good. Yeah, because that's where the education is going to come. But don't be lazy though, and like you said, like Mr. Walker said, in getting the facts right, because that'll throw everybody off, and then they won't want to trust you anymore.
Yeah, I don't want to set Black studies back and everything like that because I've always kind of want to be like Dr. Clark,
Oh, I don't
be
want to
a
be like that
scholar.
either. But
What? I mean, Dr. Clark, he was a scholar activist, like just that whole "We have had no friends" speech. That's like Black history in like 5 words.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. So
You never heard that speech? We have had no
I would no.
friends.
I don't know anything about it or him. Let's put it
Yo,
that way. And I don't want to know because, like I told you, what happened.
no, I'm talking about Dr. Clark. That's what
I'm
I'm
talking
talking
about
about.
Dr. Clark too. And this
Oh.
is Mr. Walker. Okay. So I'm doing this is about maybe 30 years ago. I was may have been your no, I was a little older than you, Perry. This is I think I had already written I had already written in the Golden Age of the Moors, right? So I'm doing a lecture on it in Texas at a it's called the Third Eye lecture or something. And Dr. Clark showed up, he was in the audience, right? And after I come down, he starts lecturing me, but actually belligerently lecturing me about, oh, the Arabs didn't give anything to Africa and all. And I said, Dr. Clark, I didn't say the Arabs gave civilization to, because at that time I wasn't even, much into the Arab portion, but I was saying that, a lot of the people on both sides of the Red Sea were, the same. There were different tribes. I'm not talking about the Sunni. I wasn't talking about Sunni, I was talking about the Beja and the Afar and people of that sort, because I had already found out the Afar and Ankara were the same people as the Afar in Oman and Hadramaut today. And, but anyway, so he started berating me about my lecture and the fact that, he thought I was saying that the Arabs, who he, of course, thought was some white people, brought over civilization to Africans. And it's not just that, it's just that when you get political like that, you can't think straight a lot of times. So he wasn't picking up what I was saying in the in the lecture because he was so into this, oh, the Arabs did slavery and all sorts of stuff. Now you sent me a video about slavery, um, Harry.
Well, it was actually what Dr. Clark said about the Berbers. It was from 5 to 8 minutes, 5:42 to 8 minutes. He
Oh,
talked
okay.
about where the Berbers came from. Like he knew somebody by the name of Abdullah Leroy, and he wrote a book called The History of the Maghreb. And he talks
Maghreb?
about Mhm. And he
Mhm.
talks about the relationship he had with him, and he gave him some stuff to read, and he talked about that
Oh, okay. So
information.
he came over to my side then. You're saying?
Mhm.
Oh,
He
okay.
said that the Berbers that they originally came from Western Asia, and they settled in North Africa, and they just kind of made that their home. And then when the Arabs had came down there, they were the first people to fight them. And he brings up and if you read
Well, hold on a second.
Mm,
You're saying West Asia. You're talking about some.
he
I
mean in
don't
the
know
Middle
what
East.
that means.
He's
I
meaning
mean,
the the Middle East.
yeah, but
That's what he's meaning.
so, but he still doesn't know who the Berbers are then?
He said that they're from
What do they
Western
look
Asia.
like? What did they look like?
He didn't go into that
Yeah,
further.
of course he didn't, because he's still thinking that these people in North Africa are, descendants of West Asians. That's what he was thinking probably. But
Hmm.
what I'm saying is, and what the Arabs and the Berbers or the Tuareg stated is that they came from Canaan in the Yemen, which is, yeah, that's part of West Africa, but Berbers and not only Tuareg, but the Africans, a lot of Africans claim to be from, groups of people that came over, and Tariq Fatah talks about it, Tariq Sudan talks about it, but we're talking about before 1000 BC. We're not talking about anything, recent. We're
We
talking
gotta.
about in the second millennium BC, when there were the Ethiopic wars and these people got spread abroad.
We gotta be careful with the whole thing of like our ancestors, saying that they come from Canaan, like can't come from the Middle East a little bit. I'm being respectful because wait, let me finish. I'm
No,
being
no,
respectful.
it's not me saying that. It's not me saying that. That's the Africans that say that, and it's African
But
Americans that argue with them about it. And the reason is, what I'm trying to tell you is that Canaan is not part of the Middle East. It was part of Tahama, or what's called the Afro Tahama, still called Wadi Kanauna, in the plain of the Kanana tribe. Those people are still there and are black.
but this is what I'm saying. Just please, I feel the fire in your voice that's kind of making me cower a little bit.
Good,
But like we gotta kind of be
good.
careful with the Tariq El Fatash and the Tariq El Sudan a
Yeah,
little bit,
yeah, of course.
because here's the issue. Since our ancestors were Sufi Islamic, there's a
Our ancestors.
yeah, our ancestors, West and Central Africans, our ancestors were Islamic.
Well, I mean, there's different people in West and Central Africa, but go ahead.
We got to be careful with that because with Sufism and a lot of like Islamic uh, Arabized nations, they tend to go by something called Sharifism. And that just means that if you claim that you're a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, that's going to somehow boost your
What does this have
status
to
as
do
a Muslim. That, that
with?
that's why if you like look at the Tariq El Sudan and stuff, a lot of that say like we come from Mecca and the
No,
Tuareg are from southern Yemen,
yeah,
so
yeah.
we gotta be careful with that a little bit.
No, who has to be careful are the people who are Arabized. That's who
That's
has to be careful in relating themselves to people they had nothing to do with.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So, no, so is we. You just said we have to be careful.
Like historians, we have to be careful with that.
No, no,
Yeah,
no. I disagree.
wait, we do have to be careful because even
No,
though it's a
no,
primary source document.
no. No. Oh my gosh. What I'm saying is that this. First of all, I don't know what you're bringing the prophet up with, who lived 1,000 years after
That's what
1,500 years after these people came into Africa and had nothing to do with this with the Berbers and people of that sort.
but what I'm saying is that's a big thing with it. A lot of Islamic countries is to claim lineage, from the prophet. And this is why if we look at
Oh,
yeah,
you're saying that modern Berbers claim lineage from the prophet?
no, I'm saying in the Tariq El Fatash, they have a whole chapter on the Tuareg and they say they come from southern Yemen.
Yeah,
But we
but you
got
do.
I mean, but what about
They do.
what about Wahib Ibn Munabbih, who says
Now
that
the Persian,
he was like wasn't it Wahib?
Judaized Persian, half Persian. He was Judaized, and his mother was Himyarite.
hold on, calm down. Wait a second, calm down, Jack. I mean, we having a discussion. It seems like you about to cuss me out. Like
No, I don't do that. That's a African American thing, but I don't do that.
I'm getting a little like I'm cowering. Like,
Well, oh, no, hurry up though, because I want to hear what you're trying to say because it does not make any sense to me.
but um, but like Wahid Ibn Munabbih says that the Berbers are they from Ham, so that means they're black basically, and we got what's my man name Al Jahiz, who had a black grandfather. He says that the Berbers are black too, so it's like we gotta the origins of the Berbers, they kind of like all over the place, like we
No, is what I'm saying is that's not true.
that the
Al Jahiz and Munabir said the same thing. They said that the Berbers came from the Yemen. Eshban, otherwise called Ashiaban, and Karen, and the Bible called Karen, people of Southern Arabia. So I'm not sure what you're
so
speaking. What do you be? See, the problem is you don't understand who you're talking about. First of all, and this is why you should be asking more questions about the Berbers, because apparently you're thinking that the Berbers were, different people from all over. They weren't. There were two people, well, at least Ibn Khaldun talked about the Berber, the first generation of Berbers, meaning like the Zagawa, Zawaga people, otherwise called Karain and Songhai. If you look in Al Yaqubi and other people call the Songhai and the Zagawa or Zagai, Sugai, Berbers. The Genoa, so you don't even know who the Berbers are. You haven't looked up my blog spot. The Sonink and other groups of West Africans are these people called Beriberi or Berabra. Okay, those people are the original Berbers, and then there's also the Tuareg who are called Berbers. Okay, so the Tuareg include the Lampuna or Aluminum, Anusamani or Nasamunians. They weren't the Garamantes. The Garamantes are the Helgara or Wangara, Sonic peoples. Yes?
I thought the Garamantes were the North Africans though. Like
Exactly.
but
You got it all wrong, Perry.
But I mean, but like they the cave people that Herodotus talks about, the troglodyte people that.
No, in fact, Herodotus said they chased the Ethiopian troglodytes. Okay, they're Ethiopian troglodytes, but there's also the Garamantes and Gambusantes, who they were related to. The Garamantians and the peoples extending to Gadames were always considered part of the Sudan as well as part of Libya. They were both Libyan and North African. In fact, it's Ptolemy II that said that the Garamantians are perhaps more Ethiopian than Libyan.
So Ethiopian, that's a Greek word for black person, right?
Yes.
Burnt face.
Yeah. And the Moors, of course, were called Ethiopians too at one time. Yeah, of course. Arabia was called Bilad Sudan, part of Arabia. A lot of Arabia was called Bilad Sudan because the Sudan was considered the land of the black people. And you mentioned Wahb ibn Munabbih, who was like Kab al-Ahbar, Abar, or whatever his name was. They were Judaized people that wrote about the ancient Himyarites and the passage of Africans like Eshban and Karain and the Fezan, and that was literally in the inscriptions of Sabian inscriptions of Fezan, otherwise known as Eliphaz, passed into Africa. They founded places like Fezan in Africa and Fez. So yeah, there's a lot you have to. I think, Perry. I'm not mad or anything. I'm just. I'm just like.
You seem like you want to jump through the screen and just straight strangle me.
That's my. I have Mars in the forecast. Athena on the nadir. That's why I'm like that. But No, if you look at the black spot, you won't be making all these mistakes. Okay.
Or,
The
you know,
Berber are people related to the Kambara, Kanambara in Hausaland, the Kanuri people, the Zagawa people. Like I said, the Zagawa is just a northern term for the Sagai or Sugai, otherwise called the Suagin or Songhai people. So all these people, if you look at the Arabic medieval writers, are called Berbers. And even the Soni, the Danawa, now called Ishnawan or Nawa, are called what? They're called Barabara, El Barabir, the Berbers.
I know
Oh,
Ibn. hmm
go ahead.
I know Ibn Battuta, and if you read, you got the book Ibn Battuta in Black Africa, translated
I
by.
know a lot of what Ibn Battuta said.
He said the Somalians are also Berbers. He called them Berbers too.
Yeah, that a large area of Somalia is called Beriberi, and that's or Beria, and that's where the original Berbers were supposed to have come from. Yes.
Mm.
I mean, after they crossed over into Somalia, yeah.
Do you believe that uh, Timbuktu was founded by a Berber woman? Because that's what it says in the
Well, the
Tariq.
Berber woman, the Tuareg, yeah, possibly. I mean, that Tuareg is still ruled by women.
Yeah, I read that in
Matrifocal,
Ronell.
the
I'm sorry.
matrifocal people. And I have that on the black spot too. Matrifocal.
Yeah, I read that in I don't. You're not gonna probably be able to grab this book, but it's called "People of the Veil" by
Read that.
Ronell
I
Rod,
read it. Yeah.
and he talks about how the Berbers they they don't eat certain birds because they believe that that's like their mom's bird. It was like real strange.
It's totemism.
That's what it's
But
called.
yeah, it's called totemism.
Mm.
Yeah. And not only that, my husband was telling me that they have a special connection or relationship with the scorpions. So they'll tell the scorpion, they have a communication with the scorpion, they tell them not to bite such and such, if you do this and that. So yeah, they're the real scorpion kings, I call them.
So
And not only
he.
that, I mean, each
Mm.
each clan or group, they were named for a lot of them were named for animals. Like the gay tools, that means partridge. Truly, partridge. Or Gadala, as they came to be called later. Um, like even in Arabia, the same thing. All those names of tribes in the Bible, biblical names, are the names of animals. A lot of the Israelite names of animals.
Yeah.
Issachar, donkey. Um, Judah, the lion's whelp, or the time. There's a time that the lion makes a certain noise. Time of the day the lion makes a certain noise. Aoud, aoud, and that's how you get that.
That,
Yeah.
mm.
It's funny because from here it looks like your eyes are going.
I mean, like I have very expressive
Yeah.
eyes and stuff, and it's like you real deep. So it's like what? Like
Yeah.
but you talking about the people of Arabia? I had read two works, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with both of them. I had read Philip K. Hitty's The History of the Arabs, and and I think it was H.G. Wells' Outline of History. I read those two books, and what I had discovered was that when Philip was writing about, it was in the chapter Allah, the God of the Quran or something, right? And he talked about how originally the name Allah, as we know it today, was originally a feminine goddess by the name
A
of
lot,
Alat.
a lot. Yeah.
And so when Muhammad was like, okay, I need to stop my people from killing each other over a camel or animal, let me go ahead and masculinize this goddess that everybody worshipped at Medina. And he made Allah, and now the Arabs now are patriarchal patrilineal.
Well, that had more to do with it because they were originally servile to the Persians, the Indo-European Persians, and that has a lot to do with their culture. like I said, especially in Mecca, I mean around Mecca and the Hejaz, where it said they're wearing the Chinese said they were a very dark purple color and that they were all dressed in veils and long robes and, worship at the Kaaba or whatever, walking around the Kaaba. The original Arabs were also matrilineal or matrifocal, and that's why even in Assyrian texts, you see a whole list. There's more lists of queens than there are men. So, like Bahia, I was in my book, I'm talking about how one of them was like Bahia, or the tribe of Bahia, the name for Bahia, who is Bilhah, King Bilhah in the Torah Bible. There's Telhun, which is the name of the tribe, the Hun bin Kuzama I was talking about, who are the Al-Kara. These Al-Kara happen to be not only, first of all, the Kara are a tribe made of clans that are found all over Somalia. The same tribal names like Isa, which in Arabic refers to Esau, is found in Somalia as it is over among the Kara tribe. But what I found out was that these people were the Ethiopian archers of the ancient Greeks. But in Arab times, because they lived on both sides of the Arabian Sea anyway, and as you know, or I think I told you, everything east of the Nile in Africa was called Arabia, because the same identical people that were in Arabia were also in Africa under the same names. So in the Berberia area was one of them, but that was also Troglodyte Ethiopia, where the children of Keturah settled. Right? The Beit Ketir are still the number one incense traders, with the Afar, who are the center of the Beit Ketir Hadasis tribe in Oman and Hadramaut. They're still the number one incense traders in the world through Somalia, right? What does Keturah mean? It means incense, because the Keturah tribe in the mountains in Median were the incense traders. Okay,
That's what Philip Hitti talks about.
Philip Hitti, yes, yeah, and he also talks about how the Nabateans are descendants. How the Hawatite tribe are the descendants of the Nabateans, right? And in colonial times, a lot of the Hawatite were very dark. Described them as dark as Negroes and stuff like that. But in the time of Al-Masudi, for example, and other medieval writers, they said Nabat in El-Nabate, or Nabit means the blacks. And the guy that wrote Chaldean or Nabatean Agriculture, I forget which one, who was Nabatean himself, he said that Nabatean people were of black color. And the reason he says that is because what happened was the Parthian moved in from Central Asia and settled in the area of Syria and became known as the Nabateans, while the Nabateans were still called the Arameans. The Aramaic script is, the Aramaic, like Akkadian, is related to the Arabic and the early Sahidic or Musnad. Musnad is the writing, but the Sahidic or South Arabian dialects. Okay. So the Aramean people were the people called Aram in Yemen. They settled in Aram. There's still a tribe called Aram Mecca in Hadramaut in Oman, who are, Tabari talks about them, who are the Aram Mecca of the Bible. So all these names were carried north into northern Arabia and into the southern Levant by these people, black people. And the Batians are named as children of Ham by Ibn Kathir, as well as al-Dimashqi. So everything before the 15th century, Ibn Kathir and al-Dimashqi mention that the Berbers and the Nabateans, as well as the Zanj and the Abyssinian, Nubian, Egyptian, or the Copts, they were always considered, descendants of Ham, black skin. they talk about why, why they were cursed with blackness.
Could you do me a favor?
Sure. Well,
I was
I don't know.
I was trying to look up your book so I could support a black woman, and
Oh,
give
okay.
and give my opinions and stuff on your work, but
Mhm.
I can't find it on Amazon. Like
Oh,
it's
Neither can I.
Oh, it's there, but it's under the wrong name. It's there, and it's also under World Cat, and my name is spelled wrong. In fact, I'm almost everywhere. Either the title or the book is spelled wrong. Let's see if I can look it up for you.
because I had found the price on it for I guess one website. It was like $245.
Oh, it's still $250. Yeah,
So
that's not me that did that. That's the publisher, because of course the information in there is priceless.
so
So hold on, let me see if I can find it. Okay. But you can't. I think it's not on sale except for the website. I mean, his publishing company has it on sale, and then it's in the libraries on World Cat. But I don't think it's. I think it's out of stock on Amazon.
so I'm wondering because I want to push this book out to the people. I usually pass out the miseducation of the Negro to my friends,
Oh.
and I'm wondering, could you send me like a PDF copy of it and
Of what?
of your book?
Oh no, I couldn't do that. That would get me in legal trouble.
It would for real.
Oh, of course.
I mean, but it's your name on it. Like,
I'm not the publisher though. It's copyrighted.
oh,
Yeah, the book's worth $250. How is the publisher going to make money? Also, I haven't even really given out my the only people that really I've given out to is he sends me copies to give out to scholars, the ones that can do reviews and then get more status for the book. I can't just
mm,
unless well, anyway, it's here, but I'd have to share it. I could share it with you.
because I want to check the joint out, and
It's
read
under the African and Arabic origins of the Hebrew Bible and ethno-historical study. So Arabic origins of the Hebrew Bible that's currently unavailable. Now, but you can get it directly from the publisher, Melon Press. I can send you that one if you want.
So I wouldn't have to pay for that one.
Oh, everybody would have to pay for it. Yeah, I can't pay for it. And my publisher is like very kind of stingy with me.
Mm.
Yeah. And he's gonna put it online too for like $1,000. That's what publishers do.
I mean, I want to support. I
Even
want to support. Like,
well, yeah, I think he wants you to support it with money. I don't think he wants you. In other words, to keep his business going, his publishing business, a small company, it's going up against Brill and Oxford and all these other big things. So if I found out I gave it away as a book to people, that really I could get a lot of trouble for that.
oh yeah, I forgot. And we still recording, so I'm like, everybody listening in on it pretty soon.
Yeah,
But like,
like I could do it to the guy that wrote the forward and different people that provided the maps and stuff like that, but photographers, but I just can't give it to alpha people.
mm,
I have like 8 copies of them. I'm gonna give it to scholars that are specialists in that, specialists in it. Not people that don't know the Torah.
oh,
Honey.
see this. See, I'm young. I'm
I
23.
know, I know,
You
but that's another reason why I can't give it to you.
like I'm trying to be a future historian in the future. That's why I got y'all two in my corner.
But it is at the libraries, some of the libraries, so I can, you know what, I might try to help the publisher get it out to the libraries more because since COVID's been around, it's been harder. He hasn't been out, and he's also 90-something years old. And he got
You
sick
said
of
he's 97.
no 90-something. I think he just turned 90. I think. but
Mm.
he got stuck up in Canada for a while, so he wasn't really able to do much with the book. But somehow, I know it got in the national. I know somebody put it in the National Museum, Egyptian University, some library in Egypt too, National Egypt. But it's at the National. Anyway, you know what I forgot to tell you because on academia.edu,
Mm-hmm.
and I put up a small, like I was saying, about something about Nahum, who was one of the Manasseh, during the time of Manasseh, he was a leader in Judea or something. And, and I put up an article about the archaeological context, the Arabian context for this people, the tribe of Nim or Nahum. And so by the time I was finished with the conference, because the conference lasts a certain number of days, like there were scholars from all over the world there, including some of the people that had put it in their libraries, like the National Library, University of Israel Library. Okay, the director of that was there on the conference. My conference ended, and I want to put something up before I go back. But that's what I'm saying. This is basically for scholars to look at, and then I guess hopefully it'll go down in price later. Instead of people taking pieces of it and copying it and doing whatever like they usually do, plagiarizing. I told you about that plagiarism.
Yeah, you told me about it. You told me about him.
But because people get things twisted. They twist things up, and they mess up. That'll mess up the message I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to clear up information about who these people were, the fact that they were Black and affiliated with Africans, and actually, it really is going to help clarify where some of the traditions that Africans have about themselves come from. Because, like I said, those are traditions that not just Tariq Sudan or Fatah talks about, but also the Igbo and the Yoruba and the Hausa and the Soninke. They claim to come, from the Far East, like that, from Aswan and places like that. But before that, some of them claim that they were chased out by Nebuchadnezzar.
But I wonder, does that? Well, I'm not going to debate a PhD, but I have another question. You said that you had came across Zahi Hawass, right?
Well, yeah, I translated things for him. He was a friend of mine. Yeah.
Oh, he's a friend of yours?
He was, but I don't know now all the stuff I've been saying about him. But yeah, he was a friend of mine.
That's interesting.
And I saw that.
It's very interesting.
That is like that.
Oh yeah, not hearing me. He used to. Well, he used to tell these jokes. He used to tell these jokes and stuff. He met me at the University of Chicago too when I was there. I would met with him and some other people. We had dinner at a nice Japanese place, and then anyway, yeah. And then later on, a couple years ago, I went to not a couple years ago. It had to be like 10 years ago. I went to a lecture he was doing at the University of Penn in Philly, and I started saying, he recognized me and said, "Oh, Damien, you look the same." Same thing you said.
Something. That's a common theme here.
Never changed, right? But so I was mad. The reason I went there is because they had this sculpture of King Tut, who was painted white, going around in a tour across America, and I wanted to find out if Zahi had anything to do with this. And come to find out, it was the curator there who was really sponsoring Zahi's visit here. He's the one that did it. It wasn't Zahi, but I ended up getting into a little argument with the curator, so I couldn't I was planning on staying and talk with Zahi, but because of the little argument, and I noticed everybody's looking at us, so I don't want to seem like the lone black woman, angry black woman again. Getting that, but Oh my gosh. Mm, 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 mm. He was saying, yeah, what of it? That's the way he came across to me. Like, I'm responsible for it. No, we don't know that Egyptians were African. He was saying like, oh, they could have come from Asia and stuff like that. But now, anyway, so that's what caused me to write this on the blog spot. I wrote some long posts called Weird Egyptology. And I go into, the development of Egyptology and how this idea of white Egyptian being portrayed as white, like in National Geographic and everywhere, even Mediterranean race, how that theory came into play. And I talk about where did these fair-skinned Egyptians come from? Because there were fair-skinned people in Egypt at a certain point that disappeared after a certain point, and then back again after the Ptolemaic. In the Ptolemaic period, you see the Greeks coming back in. And but anyway, so I was talking about the Giza, so-called Giza race, and the fact that the predominant people in these places of Giza and Saqqara and places like that and in northern Egypt in general, were of the so-called, at that time we were still calling it Hamitic type, but there were like an infiltration or streaming in another group of people that they consider they used to call the Alpine type, that started coming into these places in Giza. But they're in Giza and certain other places in the north, Abu something, which they still like to show as as one as a evidence for Egypt being fair-skinned. But no, these people were a minority in these towns in northern Egypt. And they came in, and Elliot Smith, Braxton Smith, and other specialists showed that they were a minority there. They were brachicranic. They weren't dolichocranic like the Africans. And they were, their culture was different. Their appearance, skeletons were different. The skeletons of the Egyptians were African. Okay, that's why they considered the African, Elliot Smith and most of the Sergi and other these Hamitic people Rawlinson considered them African with Negroid traits. East African, some of them had Negroid traits. And Elliot Smith considered that this other group, Giza group, was not connected to the predominant Egyptian type, but people were trying to make that group the group that built the pyramids.
So I have to add.
Those people were absorbed into the predominant type for the most part in the north.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have to ask, with the so-called Hamitic, thing, right? Isn't that kind of almost like racist to a certain degree, like the Hamitic hypothesis? Because the first time I kind of knew about that was when I was reading I don't know how you're gonna feel about when I mentioned this person, but when I first was reading Dr. Ben and his work, I think it was We the Black Jews, he roundly beats up Seligman in his books. And
no, I agree with him. Seligman and other people that were trying to make them into Hamitic Caucasoids. Even today, you see people trying to say, genetically they're a third Caucasoid. Well, when did this Caucasoid stuff happen? It certainly wasn't back in the 3,000 years ago, but there was influx of, like I said, Persian people, Turkish people into the Persian Gulf after the Sassanid period and after the Parthian periods. Yeah, there was groups of non-African people in the Red Sea area, and they probably influenced those so-called Hamitic people, but they had nothing to do with originally being Caucasoid. The Omotic people, the Nilotic people called Omotic, are probably the original, what those people originally look like. Because if you look at the Somali, all they look like is, the ones with wavy hair look just like the Omotic people with wavy hair. That's all they look like. Yeah, Omotic.
Is the term sub-Saharan African racist, or is
Well,
Is that
yeah,
a
I mean, that also developed as a way to distinguish Black people from the developed, people who developed Egypt and Arabia and places in the Near East, and of course Abyssinian, because they found out, that the Abyssinians basically came from Arabia, most of those in the late period, practically. Now they're not saying now that Afar or the Beja and people like that came from Arabia, but if you look at their names too, they're also found on the other side of the Red Sea, the Hadarme or Hadaram tribe, otherwise called, still called, in Sabian times they were called the Adramatai. The Hadaram, of course, were children of Shem. But anyway, I can go on and on. It's best that, also, if you look at my Fear of Blackness article, I talk about how they tried to denigrify even the. Well, I have a chapter in there called, I don't know why I did this, but denigrification of the Canaanites or something.
Jesus.
And in the new one, Fear of Blackness. And I talk about how even the Hausa, they go in there and say, well, the Hausa are not really Negro. They're such and such, partly, you can see they're partly Hamitic, Caucasoid, because such and such, And they have the Phoenician, they build their towns like the Phoenicians did, was surrounded by walls, and and the same thing with the Garamantians. They had Phoenician artifacts under their under their pyramids, and they try to explain that away, by saying, oh, it was just trade and stuff like that. But as you remember, the original Phoenicians came from the Eritrean Sea, not from the Levant.
That's where Hannibal is supposed to be from. He's supposed to be
came from the Canaanites, Phoenicians, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were Africans.
They were the Phoenicians. Like I used to think, like.
Well, no, what I'm saying is the Carthaginians came from the Phoenicians, and those were basically the Tifinagh raiders, or people from Saba, the Tuareg, as well as the people like the Zagai or Zagawa. Now, it seems like and the reason I say that is because what the Carthaginian district is called Ziguatani, or Ziguis and Ziguatania. People don't realize that whole area, stretching from Libya, southern Libya, and southern or central Algeria into Mauritania, was the area of Ghana and the Gnawa and Sonic peoples. The Sonic or Wangara are like just the western version of the Wakur or Songhai. The Songhai were basically in the north called the Zagai or Zagawa. And in Portugal, they're called the Zawaga, the Zenata branch of the Berbers. In other words, there was no difference at one time between, sub-Saharan Africa, so-called sub-Saharan Africa, and the Sahel and Sahara and the Maghreb.
I think Herodotus says the same thing, that the people, that the Ethiopians are indigenous to North Africa as well.
Yeah. Well, that was Strabo.
Oh,
I think it was
Strabo.
Strabo who said that. Well, I think he was citing Ephorus, who said that the people, that the Ethiopians anciently held all the coast of North Africa and also the Atlas area. The
Atlas Mountains.
Yeah. They moved into the Deirus Mountains or Atlas Mountains. Now, Isidore of Seville even said that there were three Ethiopian peoples: the Indians, he said the Indi, meaning, which is the name for Abyssinia at one time, and also Southern Arabia, the Garamantians, and the Hesperians.
Who are they?
Hesperians are the Atlantides in Greek, meaning
Atlanteans?
Yeah, the Atlantides are people of the Atlas area.
So when they're reading Atlantis, they're not meaning the underwater.
Well, they said those were also those also are Ethiopians. They also said about the Atlantis that the people that, I think it was Plato that said that there was some something that went underwater, and then the Ethiopians came into North Africa from there. But yeah, so I don't know, I don't know if that's been discovered, but definitely, yeah, they connected all those ancient peoples with Ethiopians. So and they said all the southern parts of all the coasts, just like even later on, Joseph has said the coasts were inhabited by the people called Kethamos, who are the Kitama people, who occupy, or the Tuareg people who are occupied. And I think Strabo is the one that said that like a group of tall Ethiopians came in North Africa. I'm not sure. Strabo. I'm not sure if it was him or no, I'm sure it was him, but I'm not sure if they were talking about the Wodave or the Tuareg, because the Wodave also are close to 7 feet tall. A lot of people don't know that.
Who are closest? The Wodave are close.
Real Wodave and the nobles of the Tuareg are 7 feet tall. Well, even the Smiths of the Tuareg, some of them. Like there's a famous Smith that he's a friend on the Facebook, and I mean you can buy his, he's the ruler of the Smiths of the Tuareg in Agadez. He's 7 feet tall.
That's kind of hard for me to believe, because like African people, like, evolution wise, we're not supposed to be tall, like,
Well, I don't know which African people you're talking about. I mean, Tuareg and the Wodave and the Watutsi are over 7 feet tall. A lot of the Watutsi are way over 7 feet tall. And the Az tribe of Arabians, who are called Black Giants, they're described as over 8. Some of their leaders, like Ubada bin Samit, and some of the other leaders are described over 8 feet tall. So when they're talking about these Philistines, Adites, Amalekites, giants, which is, if you read my blog spot, you'll see that Philistines were called, the Tuareg were called Philistines up until, not colonial times, but in the Iberian texts, Iberian Jewish texts, they used to call them the Philistine dynasty. The Almoravid dynasty is called the Philistine dynasty because the height of the Tuareg.
So Sam,
and then because they were the Philistines, because they were the people called Amalek, Philistines, Adites, they still claim to be from those people. Sawar bin Ad.
So you mean that the same Philistines? Like, I believe you,
Yeah.
I believe you, but you mean to tell me that these same Philistines, who I had read about in the Bible, that Solomon had committed suicide and killed everybody in the Dagon temple.
They worship. There's people worship Dagon. Yes, Amorites and Philistines. All these people they call the Rephaim, Rephidim, Amalekim. Now there's another group that mostly only the Arabic people who know Arabic stories know that, are the Tawasim, otherwise known as Latushim in the Bible. The Tawasim, that was an ancient Amalekite ruler. Actually, I think it was the first Amalekite ruler. So they call him Al-Tawasim or Tassim. And he was said to be had a brother named Gassim or Jassim. Now the Jawasim were a tribe that even Lenormant, another a French historian, called descendants of Amalek, because Amalek are a historical people. They're not, these are not. We're not talking about legendary people. Like the Amalek are mentioned by colonialists. Amalekites. Amalek are next to the Mara, mentioned next to the Mara in the area of Aden. So Aden and Hadramaut, we see all these, the darker black people. The Jawas.
I've just sent you guys a photo that you might want to check out.
See what this joint is about.
Is it on the chat or no?
Yeah, it's in the chat. You click it and. Hey, Robin, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Mm-hmm.
If I wanted you to also speak at my Africana Studies class, would you also speak at my Africana Studies class too?
I can do it. Yeah, providing they put some money on the table, I'm there.
Okay, okay, okay. That's good that you said that. Cause, but wait a minute. How would that? Y'all English cast don't got Cash App, right?
No, how it could be done is I could do it over Zoom, something like. I mean, but
Ah, but I'm saying you say you gonna need like bread. So, I mean, I'm just asking because I know y'all English cast don't got Cash App, right?
Maybe,
That's
maybe they have
no,
PayPal.
but there's other ways. There's other ways it could be sorted out.
oh okay. Because we just made a African studies class at my institution, so we coming up. I'm just doing. I'm gonna send all of this to my university, professors and stuff like that.
Okay,
'Cause
hopefully you won't get turned off.
oh no, I think now like I think it's actually on the 4 hours because we've been on here for a while. Like so, yeah,
Like 3 hours, yeah.
yeah. Like, I mean, I
Well,
love
I
y'all
would,
too. I love y'all too. Y'all are big influences on me as a future historian.
well,
I want to.
it's good that you're interested in it, Perry, and you have a lot of good questions. So I'm certainly happy to be here. I'm sure Mr. Walker is too. Don't cry. Now I cry on the web sometimes when I'm talking to people.
you
That's
said
that.
you said that one day that you didn't cry. You don't cry for certain stuff, and I'm just like, hmm.
No, I don't cry at funerals and stuff because it's just thing of death. But
All right, excuse me 1 minute. I'm gonna disappear. I'll be back in a minute. Back
oh
in.
sure,
Okay.
sure, sure, it's pretty late there.
Yeah, he probably got to use the restroom or something. That's probably what it is. I wouldn't be
Oh,
surprised.
I'm not talking about that though. That's rude.
I thought you said
Oh, I know you're a comedian, but are you trying to be funny? We don't have to talk about people going to the bathroom. Get it?
hmm, I get it.
Get
I'm
it, Barry?
sorry.
That wasn't the bathroom. I'm getting my
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, why? You're naive, Barry.
hmm.
But you know what, Perry? You do look like that Arab guy a little bit. But his name is even more like wider than yours. That Arab guy I saw a long time ago when I was actually at the Y in New York, and he was a giant like bone structure and stuff. Your face is almost like his in coloring too, but and the nose, but his nose is much wider.
Yeah,
That's how Negro he was.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot of compliments about my nose because the ladies they tend to like my nose. So I'm just like,
Oh, okay. Well, you look like you could be from that area too, from Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of people that look like you. Yeah.
I'll be scared to go down there.
Me too.
I don't know if
I
uh,
know, me too.
they might hit me over the head and I'll never to be seen again.
Or chop it off.
Hey, I'm an atheist, so who knows? They might-
Oh, that's right. That's right. That part. Yeah, you can go there.
yeah, I feel like I wonder what would happen if I just stopped the recording because I just want us to kind of let me see
Take
if
a
I can
break.
stop. No, not take a break, but just I want us to just go into other things off camera. Let me see if so it says pause recording and it says